Hello and welcome to Six Part. Today I'm gonna start a new series. What if Deku had the fire dragon Quirk? Part 1. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up and to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin.
Aizawa grunted wearily as he made his way to Mustafu's downtown juvenile detention center. After spending the morning meeting with prospective UA students, he had hoped that he wouldn't have to make any more visits. After lunch, he had actually already unpacked his favorite yellow sleeping bag. Then he received a call from Principal Nezu, who told him about an intriguing applicant who, if the police reports were to be believed, was a well-known juvenile offender in the community. He complained, "My head's already hurting," as he walked into the building. With a thick sheet of bulletproof glass between him and the officer, he stopped at the front desk and said, "This kid'll be a problem child, I'm sure of it." His gaze shifted to the three cameras in the lobby before settling on the heavy metal door that was set into the wall next to the window. He knocked on the glass, HMPH, until the officer activated the intercom. "My name's Shota Aizawa," he replied. "I'm here to speak with the JDC administrator about one of your wards." With a bored drawl, the officer said, "Yes, sir. Please take a seat. Captain Tatsumoto will be with you for a little while." He moved to sit in one of the wooden chairs that lined the walls, and Aizawa felt his eye twitch. He took out the boy's file and started to go through it. As the metal door opened and a man with beer gut emerged, he closed the file and said, "Several counts of assault, truancy, and vandalism. Why do you want this kid in Ua, Nezu?" He was wearing slacks and a fairly respectable dress shirt, and he still had a lot of muscle in his arms. He had a well-groomed beard speckled with silver hair and was bald. He bowed respectfully to the off-duty hero and said, "Mr. Aizawa," in a deep, quiet voice. "Thank you for coming in on such short notice." After receiving the bow back, Aizawa said, "UA is always willing to go the extra step for applicants who show promise." Tatsumoto gave a nod. "Let us have this conversation in my office," he says, reversing course and going through the metal door. Aizawa trailed closely behind him, scanning the lengthy corridors. He observed officers escorting small groups of teenagers in gray jumpsuits as they moved through the hallways. Whole dorms with metal bunks and a few metal tables bolted into the floor were visible through a number of open doors along the walls. Half of the boys in the facility were watching the television that was mounted on the wall inside a metal and glass box, while the majority were conversing in low tones at the tables. They ascended 2 flights of stairs, each floor displaying a similar view, until they arrived at a heavy metal door with a tiny window. When Tatsumoto unlocked his office door and invited Aizawa inside, he pointed out the window that appeared to be a recreation yard. "Here we are," he said. "I know what you're thinking, erasure," Tatsumoto said, indicating one of the brown leather chairs in front of him as he shut the door behind them and sat down behind his desk. Pulling out the file once more, Aizawa sat down and said, "And while I'm sure you've seen his profile and record, I want to assure you that those days are behind him." "It still raises some concerns," Aizawa stated. "The last charge was barely a few weeks ago in this very facility. The boys in this facility are all volatile, and you can see in the court brief that it was ruled as self-defense," he said. "The boy he fought was attempting to run the pod he was in. He was taking people's commissary against their will. Guess he bit off more than he could chew." "It seems that way," Aizawa murmured. "His file says he's been in and out of this facility since he was 5. Tatsumoto let out a sigh. "Yes. I'll never forget that first stay of his," he grumbled, "a boy of 5 getting brought in after he admits to killing his father." He sighed, "Self-defense after the bastard killed his mother, and then went for him. He stayed here for a week before the cops dropped the charges and placed him in foster care." When the explanation was given, Aizawa's eyes grew wide. "Poor kid," he grumbled. "I'm guessing that this is probably the root of the reason that he's been back here since." "Partly. The other part is the people he hung around, not only in here but at school. To put it simply, he became friends with delinquents, and followed their lead. Although he's always been respectful to staff, his relationship with others his age and almost all of his foster families usually lead to one or more spectacular brawl." "His file says he's been in and out of foster care? Could you elaborate on that?" "The trauma he went through as a child, paired with his newfound disdain for parental figures, made it difficult for any foster family to connect with him. He's ran away from almost every single foster home he's been in. For a while he was almost exclusively living on the street until he was busted for tagging a building alongside a few others when he was 11. That's when he was sent to a more strict family." "Strict?" replied that. The Jones family in Saitama were known for turning problem children like him into success stories. The state believed they would be the best answer to his problems. He burned their house down 8 months after they took him in. That deviates from every other charge he's ever had. Aizawa began. Why would he suddenly turn to arson? And why against that specific family? We didn't find out ourselves until the end of that year when he took a tumble down a flight of stairs. Tatsumoto sighed. The medical staff that we have here found scars, whip marks from belts and switches, brands seared into his back. It took the doctor about 2 hours to get the story from him. Apparently the Joneses were devout Christians, and saw his quirk and resulting attitude as a sign that the devil was in him, and acted accordingly. They're lucky the kid didn't just burn down the house with them in it. What about the last foster home? It says there was an incident that landed him here once more and landed his foster parent in Tartarus. Ah yes, I was actually sad to hear this report. He sighed. Iroh Soren, he became a foster about 4 years ago, and had several smaller children under his care before the kid went to him 3 years ago. We didn't hear anything about him for the entirety of those 3 years until about a month ago. Turns out Soren is the notorious dragon of the West. Surprised, Aizawa questioned, of the Caldera Syndicate. How did that get past the background check? It seems the man never used his real name in any of his illegal dealings. Hell, he was the only one in that group that was never arrested until now. Cops found out from an anonymous tip and raided the house. Did he try to fight his way out? Is that why? No, that's not why he's back. Tatsumoto responded abruptly. Soren surrendered peacefully, didn't even raise his voice to the officers. The kid tried to fight back until Soren told him not to. The authorities only arrested the kid because he had activated his quirk, but they're just waiting on the judge to sign some paperwork to release him from here. Aizawa sighed, saying, is there something different this time around? From what I'm hearing it doesn't seem like you would be UA material. Aizawa had been fighting with police only a month prior. Tatsumoto said dryly, you don't mince words, do you? You know, I was once a regular in these walls, and now here I am, a retired hero and administrator. He walked around the desk, sitting on its side, and looked out the window at the young people playing basketball in the recreation yard. This time around I can tell the boy is different. He's not looking for and trying to start fights. He has been much more courteous to his peers and has taken to focusing on academics. His anger issues and violent tendencies have been curbed for the most part. What do you think prompted this turnaround? Asked Aizawa, raising an eyebrow. In my honest opinion, I believe it was Soren himself who helped him turn a new leaf. Their quirks are similar, very similar, and Soren may have used this to connect with him and train him. Do you think Soren was trying to conscript him? Tatsumoto actually cracked up. The Caldera Syndicate has been inactive for over a decade. He giggled, and evidence shows that it was Soren himself who helped turn the lights off on it. The man was, for lack of a better word, retired. No, I believe that Soren saw this boy, and wanted to stop him from continuing down the same path he did. You seem to have an awful lot of respect for retired supervillain. Tatsumoto leaned back, crossing his arm, and shrugged, saying, I have spoken with him before, when checking in on his ward a few times. Is there any questions you would like to ask? He asked. His peculiarity, Aizawa said, bending forward, is known as fire manipulation. Could you elaborate? Tatsumoto looked at Aizawa and nodded. Fire manipulation, or firebending as he has taken to calling it, he can produce flames from his hands, feet and mouth, and can control fire around him to an extent. His control varied for most of his time here, though this last stay has shown he has increased his control over it. Aizawa inquired, how much is increased? He laughed, saying, I never thought I would feel a room temperature fire. He stood up completely, looking at Aizawa, and asked, would you like to meet him? During a class on quirk usage he was able to produce flames that were almost cold to the touch. With a sigh, Aizawa got to her feet and said, yes, if it's possible. With a smile, Tatsumoto stood up and said, follow me. They entered the block in question, where 8 heavy metal rooms with built-in meal slots lined the walls. Tatsumoto explained, he is currently in a segregated block due to the fight he had participated in. He is being pulled off restrictions tomorrow, though he has requested to stay in his seg cell. Apparently it helps him focus. As they came to a stop at a door marked with a big black, 4, Aizawa nodded. Tatsumoto opened the door and said, Midoriya, you have a visitor. As Aizawa entered the doorway, he looked around the sparsely furnished room, from the bed to the boy's desk, which was made of simple wood. The boy was wearing the same jumpsuit as everyone else, with the top zipped down and tied around his waist. A simple white shirt concealed multiple scars that extended up into the sleeve. He was a healthy skinny boy with long, curly green hair and lean, defined muscles. The boy glanced up at Aizawa before turning to face the ground. Aizawa took note of the pen in his hand and the papers on the desk. "Hello, my name is Shota Aizawa, and I teach at UA," Aizawa said. "It's a pleasure to meet you," Midoriya said softly, avoiding eye contact. "Hello, sir." After glancing at Tatsumoto, who gestures toward the bed, Aizawa sighs and enters fully, asking, "May I?" He asks, and the boy looks up a little before lowering his gaze again. Muttered, "Go ahead. I was sent here to speak with you about possible enrollment to UA," Aizawa says, leaning forward and resting his elbows on his knees. He watches as Izuku starts tapping his pen against the table, his legs bouncing as the boy keeps looking from Aizawa back down to the floor. "You did put in an application, didn't you?" After forcing himself to look up at Aizawa, Izuku muttered, "Why yes sir. I want to be a hero, to turn my life around and help others like me. Why should we give you a chance? I see, most hero schools wouldn't accept you because of your criminal history alone. Not to mention the notes about your issues with controlling your anger." Looking down at his rough hands, Izuku mumbles, "These past 4 years have taken a lot of my anger out of me." He laughs without humor. "I'm not the delinquent who skips school to look for fights. Truthfully, I want to avoid them at all costs. But what's the point of having my quirk if I can't help others?" "What can you tell me about your time with Iroh Soren?" Aizawa asks, nodding slightly. Izuku immediately became animated, saying, "You mean Uncle Iroh, that's what he told everyone to call him." He recalled the past with a genuine smile and a warm glow in his eyes, saying, "All honesty, my stay with him was the best time of my life. He was like an eccentric uncle, giving wisdom and advice to everyone who stopped by his tea shop. He was able to teach me how to properly use my firebending. It's what we call our quirks. At least that's the name of the fighting style. He used it to teach me how to control my temper and fire. He's the reason I want to be a hero." Izuku flinched as Aizawa slowly got to his feet and said, "Thank you for your time, Midoriya." "Thank you for talking to me, Mr. Aizawa." Izuku bowed slightly. After Aizawa turned and left the cell, Tatsumoto gave Izuku a supportive nod and shut and locked the door. "What do you think?" he asked, catching up to Aizawa. "Do you have a room where I can make a quick phone call?" Aizawa asked, remaining silent until they left the block. "You can use my office," Tatsumoto said with a smile. A couple of hours later, Izuku was dazed as he followed Aizawa into the lobby after leaving the JDC with a duffel bag in his hand and an old yellow backpack slung over one shoulder. He was now wearing jeans and a basic t-shirt. One of the officers shouted from the door, "Good luck, Midoriya," and several others joined in. "Show them what you can do, don't let them psyche you out. Can't wait to see your debut, kid." As he followed the boy and Aizawa to the waiting car, Tatsumoto laughed and said, "You definitely have a lot of people rooting for you, young Midoriya. I hope to see you going far." Izuku stammered, bowing slightly to Captain Tatsumoto as he laughed, "TT thank you Captain Tatsumoto." Tatsumoto nodded respectfully to Aizawa and said, "Take care of yourself, kid." He then walked back into the building. Aizawa stepped into the driver's seat and said, "Let's get going." Izuku hurried into the passenger seat. "Understand that this chance he is giving you is a one-time thing. If you mess it up, you won't be getting another one," Aizawa said as he started the car and drove away. "Thanks to Principal Nezu, your release paperwork was pushed through." Izuku said, "Why yes sir. You'll be staying at an apartment that is contracted through UA for students who are from out of town and need a place to stay. You'll have your own apartment so long as housing doesn't require you to have a roommate. This is where you'll be staying until the UA entrance exam. Rent and utility free, and, depending on the student's needs, grants a small stipend for groceries. If you pass, then you will continue to stay there. If not, you'll be re-entered into the foster system." Izuku muttered as he looked down, "Yes sir. You're free to come and go as you please." Aizawa went on, "But be mindful that this complex is home to no less than 5 heroes, including me. If there's any indication that you're running amok in the streets, then you'll be kicked out and your chance of going to UA will be over. I promise I won't throw this chance away. Thank you Mr. Aizawa." As he pulls into a small gated apartment complex with 3 buildings encircling a small park with a pool, Aizawa grunts and says, "Follow me." He then exits the car and heads for the center building, Izuku following closely behind. He uses an ID card to open the gate. Apartment 34C is the 5th apartment they reach after climbing to the 3rd floor. He hands Izuku a key card and says, "That key card opens your door in the gate, do no let it go." Izuku says, "Why yes sir." He unlocks the door and enters the room, scanning the modestly furnished, medium-sized apartment as he walks down a hallway across from the front door, his hands gliding over the linoleum counter. Aizawa exits the apartment and shuts the door after saying, "I'll leave you to it." "A room all to myself with no one around to search it randomly," Izuku murmurs as he sits down on the bed, narrowly missing Aizawa's departure as he opens one of the 4 doors in the hallway and enters what was likely the main bedroom, complete with a plain full-sized bed, generic sheets, and a wooden desk similar to the one he had at the JDC. "This is heaven," he says. The following day, sluggishly searching his pocket for his keycard, Aizawa walked slowly towards his apartment, forcing himself to keep his eyes open. He mentally chastised Midoriya for creating so much paperwork and for the meeting he had to attend that morning. Nezu told Aizawa and the other teachers present, if and when he passes his guardianship will be transferred to his homeroom teacher. "Although I doubt he will fail, if he does, he will be placed back in foster care. Is everyone understanding?" Nezu asked. Aizawa sighed as he opened his door, but he stopped himself before he could enter because he saw movement out of the corner of his eye. He grunted as he saw Midoriya running on the concrete sidewalk that surrounded the apartments. He appeared to have been working hard for some time because he was sweating a lot and was having trouble breathing evenly. "At least he's taking the preparation seriously," Aizawa muttered as he entered his apartment, shutting the door without turning around. After a month, throughout his katas, Izuku kept his breathing under control and his muscles taut as he transitioned between forms while reflecting on the final month of his life. Since most foster homes had strict curfews and severely punished those who disobeyed them, it was actually odd to have as much freedom as he did. Here, he could stay out as late as he wanted, and the only thing that would make him consider returning home sooner was Aizawa's weary glare. Usually, it was successful. Even in Iroh's shop, which was located in a less-than-ideal neighborhood and only saw heroes when a chase moved there, the sheer number of heroes in the area was unsettling. However, with 5 heroes residing in the apartments and several more dropping by to visit, he could hardly find a day without heroes. He was afraid that the heroes would harass him, but fortunately they didn't. It wasn't that he wanted them to leave the area. He was also taken aback by the amount of attention he received from Aizawa, who for the first 2 weeks was distant and appeared to despise him, but he did offer him some advice on how to control his breathing when running. 2 weeks ago, he had switched from observing him from the second-floor walkway to a nearby bench, offering advice and comments on his forms and inquiring about his journal entries in between workouts. By this point, Izuku had become accustomed to Aizawa's presence. "You're stiff. You need to loosen up. If you're stiff it'll make your movements jerky and easily readable," Izuku said, leaping and spinning around while he stared at Aizawa, who was standing with his arms crossed in a tank top and shorts. As he relaxed, Izuku mumbled, "Oh, right, do you have to surprise me?" As the sun slowly sets, Aizawa claims, "You just don't pay attention." She adds, "I heard you were volunteering at a beach cleanup." Oh, yeah, I was walking by it and saw just how much trash was on it, so I started cleaning up what I could. I guess word got around and more people began showing up." "Well, I assume you won't be going out today?" Izuku scratched the back of his head sheepishly and said, "Oh no, I need to focus on my katas today. It can't just be strength training." Looking back at the boy, Aizawa said, "You're right. What are those forms you're using?" "My forms? Oh," Izuku grinned and said, "Uncle always told me that it's the fire inside that makes my temper so volatile. It's the fighting style that Uncle made up. And gave me these techniques to help me distress. While meditation is beneficial, these katas also assist me in battling my fire." "Yeah? Do you want to spar? I mean, are you certain that's a good idea?" Izuku looks around the apartment complex and asks in concern. "With a fighting stance," he says, "it'll be fine, neither of us will use our quirks." When Aizawa lands a hard jab on Izuku's side, the boy drops his guard and is left vulnerable to another kick from Aizawa that sends him sprawling. "Oh okay," Izuku says, assuming a defensive stance. He reactively dodges Aizawa's opening jabs and blocks a roundhouse, then throws a few punches of his own, putting Aizawa on the defensive. "You need to use a little aggression in your fighting style," Aizawa responded. "Passively waiting to counter attacks leaves too many openings. Go on the offense." "Alright. Let's go again." After 40 minutes, Izuku landed on his back again, gasping for air, but instead of just lying down like he had done the first time, he used his arms and shoulders to get back up and launched another attack on Aizawa, this time using an axle kick and a few roundhouses. "Better, you're actually pressing attacks and taking what advantages you can," said Aizawa, flinching as he tanked the attacks and grabbed Izuku's leg, flipping him over his back and slamming him into the grass. "However, you're not planning your attacks and are acting recklessly. You must remain composed during a battle." Izuku sat up and sighed, "Yes sir." Aizawa noticed how far the sun had sunk and said, "Let's call it a day. He extended a hand to Izuku, who accepted it with gratitude and got to his feet. You hungry? Izuku cautiously replied, yeah, feeling perplexed as Aizawa started to leave. There's a ramen stand not too far from here that's pretty good, let's go. Izuku blinked and then grinned, saying, yeah, sure. He then ran to catch up with Aizawa, and the two of them walked in friendly silence until they approached the ramen stand. You keep training like this and you'll be ready for the entrance exam. Aizawa replied quietly, keep up the good work. A resolute Izuku gives the man a broader smile and says, yes sir. Thank you for your help. Don't mention it kid. Let's get some cold drinks while we wait for our food, says Aizawa, putting his hands in his pockets and looking straight ahead. As he entered the UA teacher's lounge, Aizawa yawned and looked at a few reports that Nezu had given him. The majority of the reports dealt with prospective students who would be attending to take the entrance exam and had a good chance of being accepted into the hero course. Present Mike yelled, hey Erasure, as Aizawa approached the table. What y'all looking at Budai? Potential student files. According to Aizawa, looking at some of the more promising of the crop. Aizawa glared at Present Mike, who asked with a shit-eating grin, including that Midoriya kid? I hear he's got a good shot. As he sat down, Aizawa muttered, same shot as everyone else. His thoughts turned to the previous 7 months since Izuku Midoriya was given a second chance. Few people in the apartments have any reason to be angry with the boy, who has become a familiar figure. Most people greet him when they see him working out. He was frequently accompanied by Aizawa, who trained the boy wherever possible. You can't tell me you're not pulling for the boy to make it to your class. Aizawa whispered, I'm not allowed to show bias. As midnight entered, Present Mike shrugged casually and said, whatever you say. She leaned back in her chair and asked, what are we talking about boys? Like Mike, Aizawa responded, nothing, his son. Oh yes. Little Midoriya, Midnight exclaimed, I've heard good things about your boy, Zawa. The complaint from Aizawa was, he's not my boy. As Aizawa displayed his quirk, Mike chuckled, you talk about him like he's yours. Mike said, always gushing how well his training is going and how you just wish he would take some time to relax and how he's overworking himself. Midnight started giggling while intimidating the loud voice user. With a mischievous twinkle in her eyes, Midnight inquired, what did Ms. Joke say when she found out she's a mom? Aizawa snarled, I'm not going out with her, and he's not my son. I seems to remember a drunken call at 2 in the morning informing me that you were taking a certain someone home too. Aizawa angrily yelled, I will tie you up and lock you in your office. Ooh, you're kinky today. The other teachers arrived before Aizawa could speak, so he had to keep his mouth shut when Nezu, a long-haired man who looked like a skeleton, took over. With a smile, Nezu leapt onto the table and said, good evening everyone. Let's get this meeting started. Our first order of business, we have a new staff member joining us this semester as the new Hero Foundation teacher, as our previous teacher Whiplash will be retiring. As she licked her lips and gazed pervertedly at the skeleton man, who appeared a little uneasy about her attention, Midnight remarked, he's easy on the eyes. Yes, his name is Toshinori Yagi, or as all of you know him as, All Might. 3 beats of silence were followed by a roar of chaos. All Might. He's way too skinny to be him. There's no way. This makes him even more desirable. Thank you for the reception. Toshinori swelled into his hero form after coughing up blood in response to Midnight's cry. All Might chuckled before reverting to his previous shape. The packets that were delivered to your offices address any queries you might have regarding this form. Just accept that he works for us for the time being. With a seductive tone, Midnight licked her lips and said, I hope we'll be working very close together Toshi. After swallowing, Toshinori said, I hope so too. Nezu states, we have a special case in the applicant pool this year. Now, on to this year's entrance exam. Naturally, I am referring to Izuku Midoriya. Why didn't you reject his application like the others? Cementos claims, he's the first applicant with a criminal record that you've allowed to actually take the entrance exam. Normally I would have, but looking into the boy's history and talking with my old friend Tatsumoto, I decided to make an exception this year. Snipes grunted, what if this kid does the same? The last time UA allowed an applicant with a criminal history to take the entrance exam, they went villain and attacked the other applicants. The boy shows no villainous tendencies, though I agree we cannot be too careful, so the Hero Association is willing to have 2 heroes on standby just in case he tries to turn villain. Aizawa said icily, he won't. Present Mike and Midnight both looked anxious as he said, I've spent a good deal of time with Midoriya this summer, I guarantee we have nothing to worry about. Present Mike nodded in agreement as Midnight stated, I agree with Erasure. How can we possibly give this boy a second chance if we're doubting him before he even takes the entrance exam? Midnight asked. We will have to take a vote on the matter. Nezu adds, all those in favor taking the precaution and having 2 pro heroes on standby at his testing center raise your hand. Lunch Rush, Cementos, Snipes, Vlad King, 13, and Ectoplasm all held up their hands. Everyone against? All Might, Present Mike, Midnight, and Aizawa all raised their hands. Sadly, it carries. Nezu responds, Pro Heroes Manual and Ms. Joke will be on standby. Aizawa leaned back and sighed. Now, on to the next subject, the sports festival. Aizawa got out of his car and looked around the small park in the middle of the apartments until he saw Izuku Midoriya sitting cross-legged with his hands in his lap, one on top of the other. The neighborhood kids were balancing whatever they could find on the motionless boy, giggling quietly as they put more and more ridiculous things on top of him, until they finished with a bucket full of water on his head. Aizawa walked up and quickly scampered a safe distance away as he glanced at them and said, Midoriya. The boy jumped and then let out a little scream as the bucket tipped over, soaking him in water. Are you serious, guys? Izuku moaned and gave the laughing kids a half-hearted glare. I assumed you were meditating in your room since the last time they pulled this, so I said, your fault for not paying attention. Aizawa sat on his usual bench. Then he looked at Aizawa and said, yeah, but it was such a nice day, you look tired. Don't I always? Principal Nezu had a meeting today, regarding you, he said, bending forward. Oh, is he taking back his offer? Izuku inquired nervously. Aizawa nodded his head. It's been decided that there will be 2 pro heroes watching the battle center you will be testing in. Are they really that worried I'll do something? Izuku asked, feeling a little deflated. Apparently, I am sorry that the vote passed. If I had a say in it, then it wouldn't be happening. Izuku looked at his mentor and said, it's okay. I'll prove to them that I take being a hero seriously. Aizawa was beaming. I know you will, kid. Now come on, we still have some light out, let's get some training in. Yes, sir. A couple of weeks later, Izuku looked at Ua with a great sense of achievement brewing inside of him. I made it, he said quietly, putting his hands in his sweater pockets. I'm here. He took a deep breath and started walking in Ua's direction. Only to stumble on an inappropriate brick right away. Shit. He cried, trying his hardest to maintain his balance. He staggered a few steps before deftly getting back on track and moving forward. Oh geez, that was a close one. He sighed in relief as he went, utterly unaware of the girl behind him, who had her hand up and a startled expression on her face. Finding his seat next to a blonde with spiky hair who was glaring at the stage with his arms crossed and muttering something under his breath, he put his hood up and tried to keep a low profile. It didn't take him long to arrive at the auditorium to which he had been assigned. Shitty little. Not showing. Son of a bitch. Izuku sank deeper into his seat in the hopes that the man wouldn't turn his angry mutterings in his direction. No way. Exclaimed Izuku in amazement as the lights on the stage came on a few moments later, revealing Present Mike. Good evening and welcome listeners to Ua. Can I get a, yeah? Izuku raised his fists in exuberance and exclaimed, yeah. Little did he know that he was the only one doing it. Oh, we have a player here, huh? Well then can I get a, hey? Izuku exclaimed, hey, once more, and a blonde child with a black streak in his hair joined in. Well, this is a receptive audience. Now let's get on with the explanation of what you'll all be doing after the written exam, which will be a 10-minute practical exam. You cool cats will be conducting 10-minute mock battles in one of our many battle centers. You will be facing off against robots to earn points. Points will be awarded for the type of robo-villain you defeat. There's 3 of them, and the numbers on them are the amount of points they're worth. And you, stop that muttering. If you're not going to take this seriously, then leave, he said, turning to face Izuku. Excuse me. Another light came on, illuminating a serious-looking student who was staring straight ahead at attention. You say there are only 3 villain types when the handbook given to us clearly states there's 4. If this is a mistake on the school's part, it is disgraceful and shows poorly on the celebrated name of Ua. Any shyness or embarrassment Izuku had shown at being called out vanished when he yelled, excuse me. Who the hell do you think you were calling me out like that? I got just as much a right to be here as you do. And yet you continue to disgrace us with your indecent and poor attitude. Izuku angrily yelled, come on up here and I'll show you an indecent and poor attitude. Present Mike, who was smiling and hardly holding back his laughter, called out, whoa whoa. Calm down. Examinees 7111 and 8256. Please calm down. Any physical altercation will result in both of you being removed from the applicant pool. As he sat down, Izuku clenched his jaw and yelled, "Sorry sir." The blonde beside him laughs and leans back. He said, "You're a spunky little extra aren't ya?" While the response to the query posed by 7111 was being given. They were all dismissed to the written exams, and Izuku grunted, hardly listening to the boy. A couple of hours later, Izuku, wearing a black tank top and sweatpants, tied his sweater around his waist and stood just outside the gates of his battle center, hardly noticing the outside world. "Hey!" Izuku flinched and raised his arms as he spun around, startled out of his reverie by the joyous shout. "All set for battle." With her arms raised in a conciliatory gesture, the girl behind him squeaked out, "Whoa! Whoa, friendly, sorry, didn't mean to startle you." Izuku relaxed and took a deep breath. "I'm sorry, but I don't think I know you," he said, laughing nervously. "It's all right, no harm." With a joyful smile, she held out her hand and said, "Oh, where are my manners, Ochako Uraraka, at your disposal." Izuku reluctantly shook her hand and said, "Izuku Midoriya. I'm glad to have met you. You tripped and I was about to use my quirk to stop you from falling because it's bad karma to fall before a big day and it's obviously rude to use a quirk on someone without their consent, but you caught yourself. I saw you outside as we were walking in, and I was so shocked and she trailed off, looking at Izuku, who was looking red in shame that someone had witnessed him nearly fall. I guess I didn't need to add that part, huh?" She blushed and asked sheepishly. He stumbled, "Not really, but thank you either way." Uraraka laughed with relief as Izuku scratched the back of his head, and his gaze briefly strayed past her to a familiar student who was approaching them with a robotic arm, but he stopped when he saw the glare Izuku gave him. "Leave." Present Mike's exclamation, "There's no warning in life, kids," caused everyone to look up in surprise. "Go now." Izuku launched his fire without hesitation, only looking back once to make sure he didn't burn anyone as he flew across the city. He extinguished the fire as he reached the far side of the city and fell toward a group of several fictitious villains. As he landed in a roll, Iroh's voice seemed to reverberate in his head as he popped up into a basic defensive position. "Remember the basics, Izuku. The more advanced katas are powerful, but it is not the mighty towers or weapons that keep the castle from falling, but its strong base." The 7 one-pointers are quickly reduced to slag by simple and accurate fireballs from his fists and legs. Despite how quickly he was delivering the attacks, Izuku quickly returned to his defensive stance after each one. He then moved on to another grouping of 4 ones and 2 3, spending the first few seconds dodging their attacks and grunting in pain when one of them punched him, sending him sprawled on his back as rage swept through him. Controlling your breathing will help you maintain a level head and inner peace so that you can use your fire effectively. Anger and aggression are easy ways to fuel your fire, but they also make you careless and prone to mistakes. After releasing a puff of fire from his mouth, Izuku leaps to his feet and launches another assault on the group, letting his fire fly as he moves between them. Sweating profusely as he surveys the devastation he has caused, more than 20 bots were now essentially molten puddles on the ground. He continues to move from one group to the next until he stops at the end of the street. As he leans against a building, he exhales, "That's about 30 points," with a grunt. Izuku launches himself again, destroying 4 more 3-pointers with spinning kicks along the way. As he explodes into the main street, he uses his fire breath to destroy another 3-pointer before pivoting and punching, sending a steady stream of fire at a 2-pointer that had followed him from one of the side streets. The internal wiring of the bot melts as it comes to a slow stop in front of him. Izuku exhales and slowly spins around, his eyes widening as he witnesses a purple-haired boy being struck back by a 3rd-pointer. He leaps forward and catches the boy before he can hit the concrete, asking, "You good?" Glaring at the 3-pointer as it charges them, the boy stammers, "Why yeah." Izuku asks, "Can you take it?" as he leaps back and barely avoids the car's careless swipe. The boy responds, I don't think so," and Izuku strikes without hesitation, slamming his foot into the bot's neck and shooting golden flames into its head, causing it to topple over. The boy says sourly, "Thanks. It doesn't take much to mess up their internal wiring. A clean kick to the joint should at least immobilize it for a follow-up," Izuku tells him, causing the boy to look at him in surprise. The boy said, "I didn't know that, how do you?" He smiled at the boy and said, "Kicks with no fire were taking these things out on the joints. You just gotta be in shape. Now get after it." Izuku then blasted off again, crashing into similar situations along the way. He helped out where he could, such as by running distractions on the bots to give a boy with strange balls on his head the chance to stick the bots down, or giving what looked like an invisible girl the chance to jump on the robot's back. There's more bots deeper into the city. Don't just stay on this street, Izuku answered the phone. As she dashed down a side street, encountering more bots, Uraraka turned to face him and grinned, saying, "Thanks for the advice." 2 minutes later, they were all scrap. That's 30. Just before the viewing room, Nezu looks at the various monitors and asks Toshinori, well, this is a very promising batch, isn't it? Toshinori observes Bakugo attacking the robots with great enthusiasm and responds, "You can say that again." As he glanced from Bakugo's screen to one that was tracking Iida, Nezu said in a conversational tone, "Some students will try to use their combat skills to gain as many points as they can, while others use coolness under pressure to keep up." As Toshinori watched Izuku Midoriya rip through the bots, he remarked, "And others use both. Are they allowed to help each other?" he asked, narrowing his eyes as he observed the boy assisting a few others. As he watches Midoriya help a concussed applicant get up and walk down a side street with fewer bots, Nezu hums, "It's not against the rules, and we do have rescue points to count, but I don't think advice and orders count, but his concern over the other applicants is worth noting." Toshinori nodded and said, "You're right, he's definitely trying to help everyone he can." Izuku Midoriya. I ran into him when he was helping a non-profit clean up Mustafu Municipal Beach, and they allowed him to use his quirk sparingly to shred larger trash so it would be easier to haul off. He is a decent young man. A school board member sneered, "A good kid with a criminal record. Give it time and he'll start attacking the other applicants when he realizes he doesn't have enough points. I think he's got enough points as is." Midnight giggles, "He's destroyed over 34 bots, bringing in a current score of 50. Not as high as others, but definitely within the top 5% of scores." Nezu concurred, "Let's see how they react to the gimmick." As the ground started to tremble, Izuku halted his attack on a one-pointer. He and the others looked up as the enormous zero-pointer materialized. "Jesus fuck everyone, get out of here," he yelled. "That's supposed to be a small obstacle," as he walked away a few slower applicants. He complained as he looked around the street to make sure no one was out before he started to run. "Ow. Aid. A person. God damn it." Izuku moaned as he ran towards the girl, passing a bewildered Iida who pauses to watch him run, his eyes widening when he sees the girl stuck in the rubble. Izuku skids to a stop as he turns around again, his eyes focusing on a girl trapped in the rubble, another girl fainting a few feet away. In just a few seconds, Izuku is at her side, sliding to a stop next to her while he snatches up the debris that is pinning her. "Uraraka, are you hurt anywhere else?" As he tries to push the debris aside, Izuku asks. No, she struggled out, appearing to be about to throw up, saying, "I was trying to help her after she was hit by rubble, but I think my ankle is broken, and I'm at my limit." Izuku pushed, straining, and Iida abruptly slid to his side, pushing the same piece of rubble until it finally lifted up enough for Uraraka to pull her leg out. "Just relax, I'll get you both out of here." "Come on," Iida said as he picked up Uraraka and the other girl and began running, Izuku on his tail. Looking back as the zero-pointer locked onto them, "We won't get to safety in time," Izuku dialed. "If we keep running, we will," Iida responded with a shout. As Iroh's voice replayed itself in his head, Izuku slowed down. "This next form I show you not because I think you will be able to do it now, but because I know one day you will be able to. Don't stop running." Izuku gave Iida the order as he planted his foot, turned, and started to move his hands in broad arcs with 2 fingers outstretched. "Are you insane?" Iida sobbed. "Just keep moving forward." Blue electrical arcs started to spark at Izuku's fingers, and he snapped. Since lightning is the purest form of fire and demands the highest level of control and accuracy, calling it forth is the greatest accomplishment firebenders like us can accomplish. As he got closer to the end of the kata, Izuku felt the power start to build inside of him. A white-hot, burning sensation went through his stomach, into his chest, and down into his arms, threatening to overwhelm him. To use the lightning, your mind must be clear and your soul at peace. I believe you will one day reach this state, and it may very well happen when you save the lives of innocents. Thunder roared as blue tendrils of lightning shot from Izuku's fingertips, slamming into the zero-pointer and traveling through its circuitry before leaving the area in blue light for a few moments until the last of the lightning left Izuku. Izuku lets out a guttural scream as he jabs out his 2 fingers. The zero-pointer groans to a halt and slowly collapses back, smashing through multiple buildings. Izuku said, "Huh. Didn't think." It would work, as he fell forward in a dead faint, grinning as his knees begin to give out and the timer goes off, signaling the end of the test. Uraraka exclaimed, "Midoriya," as Iida placed her and the other girl on the ground. As he ran back to Izuku's side, Iida reassured her, "I'll go check on him." "Are you okay?" Iida asked, examining the boy for wounds but discovering scratches and scrapes from the other robots. "He's barely injured. So why is he unconscious?" As the recovery girl approached them, Iida turned around and heard an elderly voice say, "Must have overused his quirk. Now, while they're getting him settled, is anyone else injured?" She tapped something on her phone, causing two medical bots to roll forward with a stretcher. "Poor dear, but that's what happens when you do something you're not ready for," she said. As she proceeded to assist Uraraka, Iida glanced at Izuku once more. He had so much strength and conviction that he threw himself into saving her without hesitation, and I thought, he must be a better student than I am. Nezu was cheering with all might, who was incredulous at the show of power he had just seen, while the teachers and other judges in the viewing room were going bonkers. Aizawa sighed, already picturing the reprimand he would be giving Izuku for his non-existent self-preservation abilities, and scowled as he watched the bots transport him to Recovery Girl's office as a reckless problem child. Paku Agna, also known as Pro-Hero Whiplash, narrowed his eyes at the boy who reminded him of a certain villain he had faced years ago while wearing white and blue furs and a pair of skier's goggles dangling from his neck. A Western dragon. Izuku sat in his living room and gazed at his television with lifeless eyes. For the past month following the entrance exam, he had been in a similar state. Only a handful of the heroes who lived in the apartment understood why he was the way he was, living his days in a zombie daze that made most people who passed him uneasy. Izuku woke up in Recovery Girl's office after destroying the zero-pointer, and Recovery Girl merely escorted him away to rest. Izuku was unable to learn much more about his chances. The only difference is that the results will be mailed. What if I didn't succeed? How much time would it take for them to come and remove me? Would Aizawa make an effort to assist me? Would it be him who expelled me? What if I destroy that zero-pointer and they want to punish me? Izuku sighed as he slowly got up and made his way to the kitchen to make himself a cup of instant ramen. I haven't even heard from Aizawa in the last month. What if he just doesn't want to break the bad news to me? He said, letting his head drop into his hands. He was stopped by the opening and closing of the mail slot. He glanced slowly in the direction of the front door and the recently pushed-through letter. He whimpered a little as he saw the UA symbol and picked it up. He muttered, "It's my results," before slowly returning to the couch and taking a seat. Before tearing the letter open and dumping a metallic disc onto the coffee table, he muttered, "Okay. Just like a band-aid." The disc quickly ignited, revealing a holographic projection of "I am a projection here." At the shout, Izuku leapt back, saying, "No way, All Might. I'm amazed," he said. "Yes, I am. Everything. I'm here to let you know how well you did on the entrance exam." You ask, why? Because I will be teaching at UA beginning this semester. Izuku stared at the hologram, thinking, could it be a teacher? Where was I now? Indeed. Izuku Midoriya, 52 hero points were awarded to you. This is more than sufficient to pass. But for a driven individual like you, that wasn't good enough, was it? Observe that the inclusion of rescue points is another aspect of the exam that is kept under wraps. Performing heroic activities during the exam will get you points, and you performed the heroic ACT. A video clip of him and Iida assisting Uraraka and the other girl, as well as Izuku destroying the zero-pointer by himself to give them time to flee, was shown on the holograph. 64 rescue points for Izuku Midoriya, 15 rescue points for Tenya Iida. Uraraka Ochako, 35 points for rescue. You broke my own score of 113, in addition to passing the exam. Izuku released a breath he was holding without realizing it. Welcome, young Midoriya, to your hero academia. Izuku wiped away a few tears that had started to form at the corners of his eyes and whispered, I did it. He said it louder, got up slowly, and walked to the window before turning around and cheering loudly. I did it. Running around his apartment like a crazy person, he whooped, it's unbelievable that I did it. Thank you, dear Agni. Woo. Breathing heavily, he collapsed back on the couch after cheering and bouncing around until he was too exhausted to continue. He pulled out his phone as a notification rang out, murmuring, a message. Come to the ramen stand, Aizawa. Aizawa was sitting at the ramen stand with 2 bowls of ramen waiting for him when Izuku hurried out of the apartment, taking the stairs 3 at a time and then jogging quickly. Aizawa slurped some noodles and said, I already ordered, so go ahead and eat. He sat down and began eating the ramen, saying, yes sir, Thank you. I'm sorry I haven't been around. Aizawa continues as he enjoys his beverage. I've been bogged down by all the paperwork from the entrance exam. It's even cut into my patrol times. But congratulations on passing the exam. Many thanks. After swallowing a mouthful of noodles, Izuku replied, without your assistance, I couldn't have completed the task. As Izuku smiled, he returned to his noodles and said, HMPH, I doubt that kid, you're one of those who just doesn't know when to quit. Both of them were silent as they finished their ramen and started to return to the apartments. It was a bit of a backhanded compliment, but he decided to accept it as he continued to eat. I'm sure you already know this, but I'll be your homeroom teacher. Aizawa started as they were ascending the stairs. Don't think that means things will be smooth sailing. I don't believe in favoritism and will probably be pushing you harder than the others. I expect nothing less, Izuku said, grinning as he paused in front of his apartment and opened the door. Don't worry, Dad, I'll make you proud. Izuku then entered his apartment and shut the door, leaving Aizawa outside, speechless at what Izuku had called him. As he places his hand on the door, Aizawa smiles and chuckles a little. I know you won't, son, he says quietly before continuing with his hands in his pockets. I can't believe I just called him Dad, Izuku said, kneeling in morbid embarrassment inside the apartment. He must be so perplexed, he bemoaned. After a week, Izuku walked slowly up to the principal's office, yawning as he knocked on the door and put his hands in his uniform pockets. Why couldn't we have had this meeting after school? He asked himself. Enter now. With a curious glance around the principal's office, Izuku intervened and said, This isn't anything at all what I thought your office would look like. How did you envision my office to look? Would it be okay if I asked? Nezu asked inquisitively, his warm smile remaining unwavering. Well, I don't know, maybe pictures of former students. Or more bookcases. For a second I thought you'd have a hamster wheel in here or something. Izuku started to perspire when Nezu remarked jokingly, the gym has a perfectly good track, there's no need for exercise wheels. Now, let's discuss the topics I have for you today, Nezu said. The first is the UA Sports Festival, where you will be required to administer the sportsman's oath at the start of the event as the student with the highest entrance exam score. Do you understand that this is not a topic for discussion? Izuku dutifully replied, Yes sir. However, he bemoaned the thought of speaking live on television. We obviously didn't tell anyone about your past who wasn't absolutely necessary, but he added, Now, another reason I wanted to talk with you is the potential backlash you will be facing while here. However, some of these vital staff members think it's a bad idea for you to be here. Your criminal record should have been sufficient grounds to disqualify your scores and prevent you from attending, according to a number of Hero Association higher-ups. I threw their suggestions in the trash where they belonged. But I can't stop the public and even students from trying to discourage you from coming here. I want you to know that the entire faculty, not just myself, is behind you. Do you understand that we will never try to discourage you from achieving your goal, Midoriya? Izuku bowed down to the animal and said, Yes sir, thank you for the opportunity. You're quite welcome. Now, why don't you go ahead and head to class? I'm sure you'd like to interact with your fellow students before classes start. Izuku heard the dismissal, bowed once more, and left. The bookcase by Nezu's side slowly opened as the door clicked shut, revealing Paku in his former hero uniform. You shouldn't let him continue here, Nezu, he says with a sneer of contempt. Everyone deserves a second chance, Paku, he is young, and wishes to be a hero. He was trained by that man. He growled, I doubt his intentions are as noble and pure as you make them out to be. 20 years prior to our arrest, the Dragon of the West was not active, and he has demonstrated no interest in carrying on with his previous work. Midoriya's aspirations to become a hero could very well be sincere. As he made his way to the door, Paku sneered, Believe what you want, I for one will be keeping close tabs on the boy. As he arrived at the Class 1A door, Izuku sighed slightly in relief and grunted, Wow, that's a huge door. All right, first day of school with people you don't know. Let's do this. He pushed the door open and recoiled instantly when it revealed a shouting match. Stop stepping on that desk, it's disrespectful. Who is it disrespectful to? 4 eyes. Izuku sighs, I already regret this, as he watches the tall boy from the entrance exam scold the boy with the blonde hair he sat next to. The upperclassmen who occupy these desks before us are being disrespected. Well, they're not worth my time if something as trivial as that offends them, are they? Look, we got off on the wrong foot, Iida said, forcing himself to straighten up. My name is Tenya Iida, and I graduated from Same. You mean private school? What do you think makes you superior to me? The blonde-haired boy demanded to know, jutting his chin out, I'll kill ya. Have you threatened me? Your fellow student? Izuku enters the room slowly with the intention of merely avoiding the two, but both of them notice his movement. Iida turns completely to face him and murmurs, "You." "Hello, Tenya Iida from Same is who I am." "Yeah, I heard you when I opened the door." Izuku interrupted, then held out his hand. "I'm Izuku Midoriya. It is an honor to meet you." Iida responded with a robotic handshake. "I must admit I misjudged you at the entrance exam. I thought you were just there to disrupt the other test takers, but you showed yourself to be a better student than I, with how you figured out the secret part of the exam." Izuku released Iida's hand and said, bewildered, I didn't figure that out at all. I just did what I thought was right, I promise. You're probably a much better student than me." "I truly doubt that." The blonde boy interrupted Iida and leapt to his feet, saying, "You don't look so tough. So you're the one who stole the #1 spot from me." Looking at the boy, Izuku narrowed his eyes a little and said, "I didn't steal anything. Like everyone else, I just did my best to pass the exam. Not my fault you were easy to beat." That boy looked familiar. His forehead was marked with a tick. "You think you're better than me?" Izuku smirked as the boy turned a deep shade of angry red and trailed off. "I don't think I am, but if the entrance exam is anything to go off of." "Oh hey. Midoriya." The door opened again before this could happen. Turning around, Izuku said, "Oh, hi Uraraka. You were so cool at the exam that there was just no way you'd fail." Uraraka took over the conversation, and the blonde boy sat back down in his chair with an angry huff. "I just knew you would pass," she exclaimed, giving a little hop as she pumped her fist high. Embarrassed, he scratched the back of his head and said, Thanks, I did my best." "I'm sure, and thank you for saving me," she said. "I didn't get the chance to say it since I had to leave before you woke up." "Oh, don't worry about it." He waved her away, saying that anyone in my position would have done the same. With an arm-chopping motion, Iida interrupted, "That's where you're wrong, Midoriya. I had only turned back to help because I saw you run to her aid. Had you not, I may have simply continued running." "Yeah. And so many people ran past us when I was calling for help." Uraraka sighed. "You were the only one who came back." Stuck, Izuku stammered, without knowing what to say. Luckily, he saw a yellow sleeping bag he recognized creeping slowly in the direction of the door. "I think we should talk about this later, the teacher's here." Uraraka turned and jumped at the yellow sleeping bag, as did Iida. Aizawa slurped on an apple juice box and forced himself to stand, droning, "You're all being irrational. It took you 8 seconds to quietly down. Wasting time as a hero is irrational. Now take your seats." Everyone was seated in a moment. Aizawa left his sleeping bag and said, "Next time, I expect all of you to be in your seats and quiet before I enter the room." He held up the UA gym uniform before throwing the one he was holding to a boy in the front row. "My name is Shota Aizawa and I'll be your homeroom teacher. Now, I want all of you to grab one of these uniforms and get change. Then meet me out on the practice field. And be quick about it." Uraraka asked, but sir, what about orientation?" "We aren't going, it's a waste of time." Aizawa sighed. UA prides itself on breaking tradition and allowing teachers to teach how they want. "Hurry up and change, we don't have all day." Everyone hurried to the changing areas and put on their workout attire. They were all speculating and whispering about what they were going to do. Izuku waited until everyone had changed before getting dressed himself. He then followed everyone to the field, staying behind Uraraka. "Okay. So up until now you've all been pretty restricted on quirk usage, mostly being confined to certain days in PE or private tutors. Here at UA you'll be allowed to use your quirks whenever physical events take place, which means I need to know where you all are at in terms of quirk usage. To gauge this, you will be running the national fitness test with your quirks." Aizawa counted all the students, satisfied when he marked everyone present. Bakugo. He took a softball with an odd metal band on it out of his pocket and asked, "What was your softball throw back in middle school?" Bakugo complained, 75 meters give or take. He threw the ball to the boy and said, "Here, try it again, but this time, use your quirk. Anything goes as long as you stay in the circle." After glancing at the ball, Bakugo asked his teacher, "Anything goes? Just don't leave the circle." Bakugo entered the circle and proceeded to wind up the pitch, throwing the ball with a loud explosion behind it and yelling, "Die, all right, you asked for it." As they watched the ball soar, some of the group asked, "Die?" He holds up his phone to demonstrate the distance and says, "I say this line of thinking is stupid and squashes potential. The state only focuses on how you can do without your quirks to make things fair." They shouted, 705 meters. A boy with red hair exclaimed, "Okay. This is what I'm talking about. Using our quirks as much as we want." The girl with the pink skin exclaimed, "This is going to be fun," and Izuku winced. At Aizawa's glare, he thought, "You fools," and started to perspire. He asked icily, "Fun? If you're here for fun, then you may as well leave now. All of you are here to be heroes, nothing more, nothing less." He moved forward, "But if it's fun you want, fine. We'll make a little competition out of this. The person who comes in last place today will be expelled." The announcement caused a startled silence among the audience. Uraraka exclaimed, but that's not fair, we just got here." "Fair?" Aizawa laughed. "Do you think natural disasters and villain attacks are fair? No, life isn't fair. As heroes you must understand that and do what you can to mitigate the damage and go beyond plus ultra. Now enough talk. Let's get this show on the road." Izuku exhaled in relief because this was better than what he had anticipated. "I had assumed that we would be going to Hell Week." As they made their way to the track for the first event, he pondered. "Midoriya, Bakugo, you two are up for the 50-meter dash, everyone else line up behind them." The two went to the starting line, with the majority avoiding Bakugo's back. Izuku told the few behind him, "You guys might want to get back." Izuku mumbled, "Good enough." As the boy counted down, he turned back and went into a running position. Those who had been in his battle center had immediately backed off a few steps, while those who hadn't appeared perplexed as they did so. 3.2.1. Go! Bakugo laughed as he took off with a loud explosion. When he saw Izuku following him, arms following him as his fists erupted in jet-like fire that sent him racing across the finish line, his laughter ceased. 4.03. 4.04. Bakugo scowled at Izuku, who turned to face the spot where he had begun. The three pupils who hadn't returned far enough were a little burned. He called them, "Sorry." Uraraka patted at a tiny flame that had caught on the red-haired boy's hair and asked them anxiously, "You guys okay?" With a faint voice, he said, "That's a powerful quirk." With her arms and face outlined in soot, the invisible girl muttered, "Yeah," before shaking it off. When Aizawa called, "Enough talk, next two, you're up." Izuku used his fire sparingly for the remainder of the exercises. Bakugo and a girl with the frog quirk defeated him in the standing long jump after he launched himself a good 6 feet past the sandpit. In the distance run, he finished third, behind Iida and the same girl, whose engines had smoked everyone. He performed fairly well in the majority of the other tests even though he was unable to use his fire. Izuku narrowed his eyes at the softball when it was finally time to throw it, not realizing that the heterochromatic eyes were watching him closely. Izuku inhaled deeply before winding up and throwing the pitch. The ball was propelled into the air by a jet of fire, which extinguished as it arced upward. Izuku started throwing punches without exerting much effort, launching multiple tiny fireballs into the air. As the compact fire appeared to explode, each one struck the ball as it descended and continued to propel it forward with tiny explosions. For a few seconds before the ball struck the ground, tiny suns were formed in the sky. Droned, 1400.3 meters. Aizawa. While Bakugo continued to glare at him, Izuku smiled as he made his way back to the group, with several people looking at him in shock. Aizawa called out, "All right," attracting everyone's attention while idly gesturing toward an electronic board. The rankings appeared on the board as he pushed a button, saying, "Those of you who ranked lower, recognize where you need to improve and work on it. Now that we're done, I feel like it'd be too tedious to tell you your scores individually, so here." As he saw his third-place score, Izuku nodded and muttered, "Good." "No." As he shakily pointed to his last-place placement, everyone turned to stare at the short boy with purple balls on his head. "Oh, and no one's being expelled." "What?" With a few exceptions, the entire class erupted. "It was a sensible trick," Aizawa said, grinning eerily, "a trick to make you put in more effort." Izuku squinted as Yaoyorozu, who was standing next to him, started telling everyone that she had already figured that out. No, it wasn't, he thought, as Aizawa yawned. "If anyone had taken this lightly, you would have expelled them without hesitation. I suppose we all went above and beyond your expectations. All right, class is dismissed. Everyone pick up a syllabus from the classroom before you leave." "You did good today," Aizawa said, approaching his young ward. "I'll be busy tonight, so don't expect an after-school workout." The class abruptly ended, but Izuku stayed because he didn't want to change in front of everyone else. "Yes, sir." Izuku bowed slightly to him. He walked away with his hands in his pockets after Aizawa stared at him for a while and said, "Try not to stay out for too long tonight, son." "I'll be home before curfew, Dad," Izuku said. coughing and shaking his head as his eyes widened. Assure me. Izuku gave Aizawa a call before making his way to the locker room. With a faint smile, Aizawa muttered, HMPH, problem child. He halted as he turned the corner and discovered Midnight waiting. So, the adoption was successful, right? Should we switch to Izuku Aizawa on the roster? Midnight asked, laughing. Aizawa threatened, do it and I kill you in your sleep. As he continued to walk, she laughed and said, now, I'm not into snuff films. But seriously, Midnight went on, placing her arms behind her head, you two are practically father and son, so why not just make it official? He's already in the custody of UA, putting unnecessary paperwork through now would take months, by the time it goes through he'd probably be of age. True, but still, you could do it for the symbolism. With his eyes slightly squinted, Aizawa sighed in agony and glared at one of his oldest friends, asking, is that a hickey on your neck? She said with a smile, yep, it better not be from one of the upperclassmen. Nope, she sang, pausing a little as they came to a stop at the teacher's lounge. All Might was there in his skeleton form, buttoning up his shirt and flashing multiple love bites on his neck and chest before adjusting his collar and tie. Good evening Aizawa, he said, his eyes on Midnight. Oh. Namori, hi. The skeleton grinned as she winked and said, hey Toshi. He waved them off as he left, saying, it's good seeing you both, but I need to be going, running late for a meeting. Looking at Midnight, Aizawa said, you really can't help yourself, can you? Nope. Ms. Joke and Mount Lady will be jealous. I truly cannot be more disappointed in you. Oh come on. You gotta give me props for that. Midnight cheered and bumped his fist with her own as Aizawa silently raised it. As they strolled along, Aizawa questioned, is this an actual relationship this time? Or are you just getting your kicks in? According to him it's too dangerous to have a real relationship, but that's fine for me. That just means we get to have fun. She puckered up, he may be a skeleton but you have no idea just how powerful he still is, especially when he... Aizawa interrupted, saying, save the talk for Mike, I really don't care beyond what I asked. You're no fun anymore. I never was. You used to never stop laughing when you were with Emi. That was her quirk. Sure Aizawa. As they walked, Izuku spoke courteously with Iida and Uraraka, primarily responding to their inquiries until they arrived at the station. I still don't think it was okay for Mr. Aizawa to use such deception against his own students, Iida replied. Heroes should always be truthful. Yeah, but he was right. Life isn't fair and this is a good example. Uraraka roared, what do you think Midoriya? I think we should count ourselves lucky he didn't expel anyone. Midoriya responded with honesty, he's known around school to expel entire classes if they didn't meet his requirements. As the train entered the station, Uraraka exclaimed, wow, he must really like us, weep. This is my train. Iida, who was wearing glasses, said, mine as well. It was a pleasure talking with you Midoriya, have a good rest of the day. Uraraka exclaimed, yeah, see ya Midoriya, as they got on the train. When the doors closed and the train departed, Izuku waved goodbye. He sighed and took a seat on one of the adjacent benches. So, Bakugo's irritated voice said, causing Izuku to leap and turn to face the boy who was leaning against a pillar. You don't remember me, do you? Izuku glared at the boy. Sorry, I don't seem to recall us ever meeting before today. Izuku grumbled sheepishly, if it makes you feel any better, I barely remember anyone I've met the last decade except for maybe 2 people. The boy is glared at by Bakugo, who sneers, figures, you really are such a Deku. The nickname caused Izuku's eyes to widen. I haven't heard that name since, he said, staring at Bakugo as he slowly stood up. Keikachan. You're going to be out late tonight, then? Holding the phone to his ear, Izuku sighs and says, yeah, it's important, and I promise I'll head straight home as soon as I'm done. Alright, I believe you, just make sure you don't get into any trouble and be back before curfew. Before hanging up, Izuku said, I won't, thanks Dad. He turned to face Bakugo, who was sitting on 3 seats with his arm dangling over the window as he gazed out. Izuku sat down opposite him slowly, placing his elbows on his knees, clasping his hands in front of his mouth, and gazing at the floor. The train moved slowly into the next station, pausing for a few seconds to open the doors so that anyone could get on or off, and neither boy moved as the doors slid slowly shut. Mom did everything to try and find you, Bakugo said softly, causing Izuku to look up. She was at the precinct every day pushing the cops for information on you. But since she wasn't family they wouldn't give her much information. You were lost in the system, Least that's what they told her. Old lady was depressed when she couldn't find you. He glanced at Izuku, didn't understand it for the longest of times. But she said she owed Auntie Inko to take care of you, and she failed. Slowly lowering his hands, Izuku muttered, I'm having a hard time processing this. Why? Do you not think she would look for you? I didn't think anyone would. He said quietly, causing Bakugo to raise his eyebrows, when I was in the foster system. Going from shitty home to shitty home. I dreamed of someone showing up and whisking me away. Some long-lost relative or something. After so long I just figured I wasn't important enough for that fairy tale ending. As the train slowed again, Bakugo sat up straight and said softly, she tried Deku. She really did. He sighed and got up as the doors opened, saying, let's go. With a nod, Izuku trailed the boy off the train. As they walked down the street, Bakugo inquired, so who was that you were talking to? When he saw Bakugo's bewilderment, he clarified, my dad. Well, Mr. Aizawa, he said, he's been my mentor and guardian for the last year give or take. Hey, strange, Bakugo muttered, putting his hands in his pockets, your dad is our homeroom teacher. Do you think he'd be lenient with us as a result? Izuku grumbled, yeah right, you have no idea how terrified I was when Ishido said what we were doing was fun. He may be a good guy but dad really takes hero work and training seriously. Last time I said training was fun he put me through a hell week. My limbs were so sore that I couldn't walk up the stairs. Harsh, wonder why he didn't do that today. He grumbled, instead of just trying to scare us with that bullshit expulsion line. Bakugo stared at Izuku in shock as he said, oh no, he was serious. Had we not taken the assessment seriously, he would have expelled last place and anyone else he thought wasn't up to snuff. Well, at least he's not full of hot air. Bakugo sighed as he ascended the stairs to his home, opened the door, and turned to face Izuku, who was now staring at the house with a range of emotions on his face. Come on, he responds, we made it this far, don't wimp out. Taking a deep breath, Izuku moved forward and followed Bakugo into the house, which was as domestic as any Izuku he had ever been in, with small trinkets lining the shelves and pictures hanging on the wall. Katsuki. Is that you? From the adjacent kitchen, a female voice yelled. Yes, it's me. Bakugo responded with a shout. You're a jerk. You're running late, she yelled. Can you, old hag? You're in for a surprise. His mother came into the hallway to chastise him, but she stopped when she noticed Izuku standing behind him with his hands in his pockets and smiling uneasily. Hey, auntie, he muttered as she stepped forward a little. Izuku? The boy nods as she asks, and she moves slowly forward, placing a hand on his shoulder as she passes him. He easily backs off so his mother can see his friend, and she carefully wraps her arms around him in an embrace, tears running down her cheeks as Izuku awkwardly returns the embrace. Mitsuki poured tea for Izuku and Bakugo, who were all seated around a small table in the kitchen following the tearful reunion. We'd been friends for years before that, and we were going for the hero course. Of course we didn't make it. She sighed as she sat down and picked up her own cup of tea, explaining that, your mother was so timid and shy, she just couldn't get the drive to pass the entrance exam and I passed the exam but got moved to general studies after the sports festival. Apparently my attitude wasn't appreciated by the class and losing out in the first round didn't help my chances either. She looked up, smiling wistfully as she recalled the past. Izuku murmurs, my father. His voice is devoid of affection for the man who assisted in his birth. She shook her head and said, he was a doting boyfriend and later on a picture-perfect husband and father. But I could never shake the feeling that there was something. Off. Your mother refused to listen to me. One of the drawbacks of falling in love is that you're blind to any faults your partner may have. We got into a big fight our last year and while we were still friends we weren't as close as we used to be. She looks down into her tea. That changed when you were born, she says. He was so obsessed with you gaining a powerful quirk and becoming a hero, she says. However, he didn't want you to succeed for your own sake. Instead, he wanted to profit from your potential success, wealth, and prestige. He was incensed when the doctors declared you to be quirkless. She looked up and said, the night she died was the night she was planning to go. I was supposed to be there, and I tried. But Katsuki was sick and she sniffled as she started crying again. I didn't hear from your mother for a few weeks, and when I finally got a hold of her, she was talking about leaving him. I can't blame you knowing you did what you could to find me. I don't blame you, or my mom. The only person I blame is that man for what he did, and Agni willing he's burning in hell, Izuku said in a whisper as he stood and moved to her side, giving her an awkward but consoling hug. Bakugo concurs, saying, one can only hope, Thank you, Izuku, I needed that. Now, why don't you tell me how your life has been? I want to know everything, Mitsuki says, wiping away her tears and patting Izuku's arm as he slowly pulls away. Izuku then told her about his early years, leaving out details he felt she didn't need to hear. He talked positively about his time with Uncle and Aizawa, attempting to hide his time in the JDC, but reluctantly telling her when she gives him a look only a mother could give. Before long, they're enjoying the meal she prepared and giggling over some of Izuku's stories from his days of policing the streets, along with Mitsuki's own tales from her and Inko's early years. So your mother is slowly lowering me to the ground. Mitsuki began, and everything's going fine. We thought we'd be able to get down and out the front gate before the teacher even knew we were gone. Well, we didn't account on the fact that the teacher wouldn't be out of the room for long. He bursts through the door and demands to know where I am. This of course breaks your mother's concentration, and I would have fallen to my death or injury if I hadn't have latched onto the ledge. Izuku laughed, and Bakugo erupted in laughter. So here I am, hanging on this ledge with 3 stories underneath me, and I can hear the stupidest conversation I've ever heard going on above. She laughed as she started to imitate her instructor. Where's Mitsuki? Oh, I think she went to the bathroom. Well then how come I didn't see her? She runs really fast. She raised her eyebrows. Meanwhile I'm doing all I can to haul myself up to look into the window, and when I did, who do I see but Nomori Kayama. Midnight, cried Izuku. The exact same, she affirmed, opening the window without offering to help me up. So, you're just hanging out? She said, leaning out. They all burst out laughing as Mitsuki tries to continue, and I say, well, isn't it obvious that I've fallen for you? And she got so flustered that she almost fell out of the window herself. Izuku remarks, I can't imagine Midnight getting flustered. Bakugo chuckles. Oh, back then she liked to think she was so suave and cool. She grinned, but you even looked at her for too long and she would get flustered. She breathed deeply. She got me into that room and I thought I was in the clear, when who walks in but Hisashi Yamada, the loud mouth of Ua. He pops into the room and immediately screams, Yo Mitsuki. Exactly why are you here? Mitsuki grinned and said, I got 3 more weeks of detention, and Inko got 2 for aiding and abetting, made it sound like I was a fucking criminal. The 2 boys laughed once more as Mitsuki said, and I get caught. Izuku smiled and asked, were you? As Bakugo rolled his eyes, she drew lead. I can neither confirm nor deny that with Katsuki here. As he looked at his watch, Izuku laughed and said, I have to leave because I have to get home before curfew. As she and her son got up and walked to the front door, Mitsuki said, well, don't be a stranger. I expect you to be coming around here at least once a week. I promise to drop in as much as I can. He concluded by saying, goodbye Aunt Mitsuki. As Bakugo walked beside him, she waved him away. Walk you to the train, he said sternly, his hands in his pockets. Izuku remarked, your mom's cool. Even though a tiny smile of fondness appeared on his lips, he complained. HMPH, old hag likes to talk about her glory days. You should hear the story about the time she met my old man. As the train arrived at the station, he laughed and stepped onto the platform, saying, I'll keep that in mind. Thank you for this Kachan. I needed it. Don't mention it, nerd. He grumbles, just so you know, this doesn't change a thing. I'm gonna beat you and become number 1 in our class. Just because the old hag has a soft spot for Ya doesn't mean I'm gonna hold back. He got on the train and turned around, grinning at him, saying, good luck, number 2. All right, Izuku agreed, then you better understand that I won't make that easy for you. Bakugo started screaming at him, don't think you can get all cocky Deku, I'll kill Ya, as the doors closed. Izuku sighed contentedly and sat down, grinning and gazing out the window. As the train sped along, he asked himself, things are looking up, Midoriya? A few hours prior, after hanging up, Aizawa walked back to where Paku was sitting and examining a case file. You know you didn't need to come with me, right? Aizawa said, sitting down beside him. This isn't even an actual case, I'm just following up on some things. Paku sniffed and snapped the file shut, saying, I know, but anything that involves the Dragon of the West concerns me. I just want to get the full picture of Midoriya's time with him, Aizawa was grumbling. And I want to find out what he had planned for the boy. As the door buzzed open and 2 armed guards emerged, Aizawa let out a sigh. One of them beckoned the 2 heroes forward, saying, this way, erase your head, Whiplash. They were led down slender corridors with solid steel doors that were blank and lined the walls, and they walked in silence. This place is very different from the JDC, or even the municipal jail. Tartarus is where they house the worst of the worst. Paku said disdainfully, its security is heightened and the guards, armed. I don't think I need to tell you what would happen if it were anything less. As the guards pause at one of the doors, Aizawa responds, "No, you don't. He's a minimum security threat," one of them said, "but still, don't hand him anything, and keep your limbs clear of the bars." The door slid open, revealing a room with bars dividing it in half. Erasure said, "Got it." An elderly man sat on the other side of the bars, his gray hair long with a bald spot at the front, shaggy and unkempt like the beard on his face. He was wearing a basic prison uniform that was stretched by his plump figure, and at the moment, he was sitting cross-legged on a plain mat with a hot cup of tea in his hands. He sipped the tea with his eyes closed, then slowly lowered it as he opened his golden eyes and gazed at the two men. "Eraserhead. Whiplash. What a pleasant surprise," he exclaimed, seeming sincere in his joy at seeing them. "Have a seat. I'm sorry there's no chairs in here, but the mats are mostly comfortable." Paku sneers and doesn't move. "Mr. Soren," Aizawa begins as he sits across from Iroh, but stops when Iroh laughs. With a sidelong glance at Paku, he continues, "Please, I believe we are all friends here. Mostly, call me uncle, everyone does." After a brief pause, Aizawa says, "Uncle," cautiously, "I'm here to speak with you about Izuku Midoriya." "Has something happened to the boy?" Iroh asks anxiously, his once jovial expression turning to one of worry. "Is he all right?" "He's doing just fine." Aizawa reassures the individual, "But I wanted to talk with you about his time living in your foster home." He put his tea on the floor and placed his hands in his lap. "Ah," he sighs with a nostalgic smile, "those were good days. He was the oldest child living there, and the others, when there were others, were 5 or younger, so we connected a little better than the younger ones. He was an angry, sad boy when he came into my care, and I did not know the exact specifics of his former home until he told me himself, but I knew he needed guidance, so I slowly earned his trust and taught him what I could about life. He was a quick learner, and absorbed all the lessons I could give him. Though now that I think about it," Iroh wondered, putting a finger to his chin. Ignoring Aizawa's warning glare as he moved forward, Paku interrupted, asking, "What were your plans for the boy?" "My plans for him? Well, I had thought to maybe adopt him and have him stay with me permanently. A boy needs a stable home to be able to achieve his dreams and flourish." "So you're a humanitarian now?" Paku grumbled. "You expect me to believe you taught this boy your fighting style to give him a better life?" "I taught him the art of firebending to help him control his anger and focus his mind." Iroh chuckled as he crossed his legs. "Those of us with the inner fires of Agni are hot-tempered, and quick to lash out. While I will admit that these forms can be used for battle, they offer the secondary purpose of containing that anger and focusing it into something productive." Paku insisted, "Were you attempting to instruct Izuku Midoriya and help him to relaunch the Caldera Syndicate?" With a puzzled expression on his face, Iroh opened his eyes and asked, "Why would I want to do that? I'm the one who helped dismantle the syndicate." As Paku spluttered, Aizawa's eyes grew wide. "I see you are confused." He grumbled, "Not many know this after all, but after the death of my son, Liu Ten, I quit the syndicate to find inner peace, and achieved it after 4 long years housed in the temples of the Shaolin monks. It is they who helped me refine my firebending and taught me how to control that fire, instead of letting it control me. When I returned to Japan, I put in an anonymous tip and had my brother and his cohorts arrested." He smiles sadly at them. "I know that I have done a lot of bad in my life, and I know there is nothing I can do to fully redeem myself, but I have put no more evil in the last 20 years. I took Izuku in and trained him because he reminded me of my deceased son. I did what I could to help him out of that dark part of his life, and hope that he continues upon the right path. Even while I am in here." "He is continuing on the right path," Aizawa replied. "He enrolled into UA, and achieved the highest score in the school's history." Paku laughed at this and turned away from the man when Aizawa glared at him again. "I taught him everything he knows. Is he doing well in the school?" Iroh asks, grinning and putting his chest out. "The first day was today, but from what I've seen he will go very far as a hero." "You have no idea how much it warms my heart to hear this. If you see him, please, tell him I am proud of him." "I will." A knock at the door caused Aizawa to stand. "Thank you for your time, uncle. Hopefully I will be able to visit again soon. And I'll talk with the administrator, see what we can do about getting you some visitation hours so you can see Izuku." "That would be wonderful." Iroh lets out a sigh. "You have a good day, Eraserhead, you too, Whiplash." Paku simply sneers as he leaves, and Aizawa bows slightly before trailing behind him. The guards swiftly flank them as they leave. After they leave Tartarus, Paku remains silent and mutters, "I don't trust that man. I know he is up to something, and it all centers around Midoriya. Midoriya has shown no signs of following Soren's younger self into a life of crime. Aizawa states it bluntly. He sneers, "Don't you mean uncle?" After taking a deep breath, Aizawa glares at the man and says, "Give him the benefit of the doubt. Midoriya is a model student with a bright future. You're close with the boy, you've trained him, how do you know he's not just playing you?" Paku asked, narrowing his eyes, forcing Aizawa to stop. "Are you sure your feelings for the boy haven't blinded you to his faults? How do you know your hatred for Iroh hasn't blinded you to his good qualities?" Aizawa asked, turning his head slightly and giving the man a measured look. "He's still young, Paku, and deserves better." Aizawa then got into his car, leaving Paku standing by himself in the deserted parking lot, staring down with narrowed eyes. Izuku waved half-heartedly to Uraraka and trudged into class, yawning. "Hiya Midoriya," she said, "you appear to be quite worn out." He sat down in his chair and muttered, "I didn't get to sleep until 1 because the train was stopped for 2 hours last night when I tried to head home." "That's bad luck," she said with a wince, "will you be okay?" He gave her a weary smile and said, "I'll be fine." As more people started to arrive, the conversation came to an end. Bakugo was among the last to enter, giving Izuku a slight nod before taking a seat in front of him. Classes soon began, and Izuku tried his best to stay awake, but he fell asleep during math and was roused by an unimpressed ectoplasm. Fortunately, the afternoon was quickly approaching, and he would undoubtedly be awakened by the foundational hero class. "I'm coming like a hero through the door." As his class started to erupt, All Might yelled and walked spectacularly into the room. "Everything is possible," Kirishima cried out. "Wicked cool," concurred Kaminari, "isn't that his costume from the Silver Age?" "Young heroes, welcome to the class of foundational heroes. In this class, you will learn the fundamentals of what it takes to become a hero," the pro-hero exclaimed, holding his fists to his hips. "And the lesson for today is battle training." Izuku and Bakugo immediately sat up a bit more straight, saying, "Deku, you're going down today." Bakugo chuckled and said, "I love training like this." Izuku grinned and said, "Whatever you say, second place," while Bakugo started to splutter angrily. "It appears that there are already some enthusiastic players present. Young men, don't worry. You'll have your chance to shine." "Ha ha ha ha." All Might chuckled. "Obviously. The uniform is one aspect of being a hero. Get dressed and meet me at Training Ground Beta," he said, taking out a remote control and pressing a button that caused 2 rows of suitcases to slide out of the wall. Izuku waited until everyone had left before grabbing his costume, while everyone else quickly grabbed their uniforms and made their way to the locker rooms. "Well, you don't have much time, young Midoriya, so go to the locker room," All Might told the young man. Izuku opened the case and peered inside, saying respectfully, "I was going to change here, All Might." All Might said unsurely, "I don't think that's allowed, young man. We did it yesterday. Please, All Might." With a sigh, All Might nodded and said, "I'll let it go for today, but you'll have to change with the others the next time, okay?" Izuku nodded his head in the man's direction and said, "Yes sir." After All Might left, Izuku had to change out of his uniform, exposing the wounds from his early years. Numerous scars, particularly on his arms, were from training. Small, uneven scars from falling through various terrains. Burn scars from practicing his quirk, and wounds from various fights he had been in, including those from knives and people with ballistic quirks. However, there were other wounds on his back, such as cuts from a whip and switch that left long scars along the left side of his back. The kanji for demon and monster were carved into his shoulder blade, the crisp lines indicating someone who had done this countless times, and a brand representing the Christian cross was pressed into his body on his rib cage, just beneath his arm. Izuku sighed as he took out his costume and stared at the plain green robes. He had taken inspiration from Uncle and modeled his costume after the robes worn by the Shaolin monks. He quickly put the robes on and looked down, revealing his right arm, left shoulder, and pectoral, while his left side was fully covered, concealing his more horrific scars. His ankles were wrapped tightly in a lighter shade of green cloth, which also covered part of the pointed black boots on his feet. Izuku rolled his shoulders and gathered his belongings before making his way to the locker room, squirming as he entered and saw that many students were still changing. With a start, Kirishima said, "Already change?" Izuku put his clothes in one of the lockers and replied, "Yeah." Izuku glared at Mineta, who shrank and snickered. He must be shy about changing around other guys. "Nice outfit, but," Kaminari remarked, glancing at Izuku, "look at those scars. Man, must have been a difficult training course for you, huh?" Izuku muttered as he made his way to the exit. Yeah, training. See you guys out there. Man, guy's kinda cold ain't he? Kirishima called out to the others after Izuku had gone. Later Midoriya. Not like we actually know him. Ojiro responded. I mean we barely know each other as it is. True, but you'd think he'd open up more since we're all gonna be around each other for the next few years. Pulling his uniform's cowl over his head, Sato said, give him time. I'm sure that's all he needs. Izuku, Bakugo, and Iida were the first to arrive at the training ground. Bakugo chuckled, nice pajamas hothead. Izuku grinned and shot back, says the guy who put giant tacky grenades on his arms and honestly thought it made him look cool. Bakugo smirked malevolently and said, oh just wait, these got a surprise in them. You two are strange. Iida responded, but I'm assuming all this talk is simply just another form of your rivalry. Izuku looked up and down at the boy and said, got it in one Iida. Nice costume by the way. He tapped on the pipes that protruded from his stomach and said, thank you, it's designed to be much more aerodynamic, though I could have done without these decorational pipes. As more of their classmates showed up, Izuku remarked, adds character. As Uraraka approached, she exclaimed, wow, you guys look so cool, I wish I had been more specific in my costume, this suit is skin tight, she whimpered. Bakugo kept his gaze on her, but Izuku, like Iida, flushed and turned away. Bakugo, trying not to look away from her face, said, don't whine, round face, it won't catch on anything if it's tight. Round face? She inquired, appearing a little offended. All Might landed in front of them before anyone could say anything more. Look at all of you, he boomed, it's important to look the part, and right now, you all look so cool. He laughed and then posed again. Now it's time to see if your skills match up. I hope you're prepared, you zygotes. All Might Sensei. Iida replied with a raised hand, this area is much like the combat areas we were in during the entrance exam, will we be conducting urban battles? Sort of, today you'll be conducting an indoor battle scenario. Curiosity prompted Sue to inquire, but what about basic training? The best teacher is experience. Having said that, today you'll be going up against your own classmates, no easily defeated mindless robots here. Isn't that dangerous? Wondered Uraraka. Bakugo questioned, how bad can I hurt the other team? Aoyama purred, doesn't my cape look magnifique? Let me explain. All Might exclaimed, as he pulled out a small, alright, today's battle scenario is this. A team of villains have procured a weapon of mass destruction, and the heroes have to stop them. Heroes win this exercise by either securing the weapon, or capturing all the villains. While the villains win if they manage to keep the weapon out of hero hands or capture the heroes. And to decide the teams, he opens a plain box, you will be drawing lots. But sir, wouldn't it make more sense to pair us up yourself? Iida responded. Before All Might could say anything, Izuku began, think about it Iida, adding that, heroes often have to partner with whoever's on scene. Right you are young Midoriya, now everyone line up and grab one piece of paper out of the box. Izuku grinned as Uraraka approached him and exclaimed, looks like we're partners, as soon as everyone had pulled the paper and paired up. Yes, Izuku smiled. All right, you've established your teams now, the first matchup is about to begin with a draw. Which will be? He extracted small white balls with letters from two boxes that were now next to him. Team A versus Team D. Bakugo smiled, at last, as the other boy laughed, he chuckled and glanced sidelong at Izuku. Hey Bakugo look, I'm on Team A, second place for you again. Stop asking that this fight Deku has anything to do with you being on Team A. Team D will be the villains, and Team A will be the heroes. Go inside the building and spend 15 minutes preparing for the exercise. Then, follow me to the observation deck, everyone else. Izuku sighed as he perused the multiple sheets of paper that All Might had provided them. I think it's showing the first few floors being a mix of twisting hallways and small rooms. I can barely make sense of these blueprints. Yes. But after the third floor, the hallways vanish, leaving you with two floors that are just full-sized rooms, with another floor with winding hallways at the very top, Uraraka chirped. That's cool. I take it that your quirk is zero gravity? Yes. Okay, so I think we should float up and enter into the third floor. I doubt they're gonna put the bomb on any of the hallway floors. Izuku said, especially with Iida's quirk. Sounds about right, she replied, so what's the plan beyond that? Izuku rolled up the plans and said, if Bakugo's going to do what I think, then he's gonna come straight for me. If that's the case, I want you to leave as soon as he engages and go to the bomb room. What if it's Iida? Then we're kinda screwed since he's faster than my flames. Izuku murmured, but I'm almost certain that Bakugo will be coming for us. All right, then. Let's take our places. As soon as we get the go-ahead I'm gonna go down and blast Deku and round face out the building. Bakugo told Iida. Don't you think patrolling would be more beneficial for me? I'm faster, Iida asked. Additionally, your mobility is poor. Bakugo cut in. Deku will exploit the fact that you can't turn sharply. With that nerd, I could easily wipe the floor, you got it. Get started. Bakugo quickly left the room, leaving Iida in his wake. Hold on. Shouldn't we actually have a plan? Our purpose is to collaborate? With Izuku already in a defensive position and looking around, Uraraka and Izuku entered the window in silence. Infiltration success. Uraraka gave a low cheer. As they started down the hall, Izuku muttered, remember the plan. There should be stairs around this corner, perhaps we ought to, oh. Uraraka move. He commanded, rolling forward to her side as he sent several fireballs at Bakugo, who dodged as best he could. With a sweeping wave of his arm, Izuku created a wall of fire between the two, absorbing an explosion. Uraraka gasped in surprise as she stumbled a little, but Izuku steadied her and then noticed movement out of the corner of his eye, pushing Uraraka away and quickly falling back, easily dodging the explosion Bakugo sent his way. Go. While Izuku dropped the wall of fire and stared down at Bakugo in a low defensive stance, Uraraka fled up the stairs. Bakugo sneered and stalked in the direction of his rival, friend, saying, I told you that you wouldn't be on the top forever, Deku. Kirishima whimpered, come on Bakugo. A sneak attack is so not manly. Manly or not, it's still a viable strategy, and don't forget, young Bakugo is in the role of the villain. All Might boomed. Kaminari questioned, did you see those reflexes on Izuku though? Dude's skilled. His style is heavily influenced by Northern Shaolin Kung Fu. Ojiro added, from what I can tell it's several different styles, but well-rounded altogether. Okay, but was it really smart to split up? Mina replied, wouldn't they be better off trying to take Bakugo down together? Midoriya has already shown some form of control over fire that's not his. Todoroki stated clearly, Bakugo's explosions may not be full fire, but it would stand to reason that Izuku could lessen their effects. For Yaoyorozu, unless he has a limit, he may not be able to control a certain amount of fire, or be able to produce fire over a certain temperature. He might not. Todoroki responded, these last 2 days Midoriya's consistently produced fire without any adverse. My father will overheat after using his quirk too much. It would be simpler than engaging in combat, Mina said, couldn't he just use that lightning move Uraraka told us about? All Might grabbed his student's attention by saying, young Midoriya was warned against using that attack. It's too powerful and could lead to serious injury in this scenario. Izuku grunted as he launched the assault, firing at Bakugo with swift kicks and jabs. Bakugo easily ducked the fire and retaliated with his own explosions. Izuku moved deftly between the explosions, his eyes widening as Bakugo materialized in front of him. Game over, Deku. Bakugo snarled, only to growl in anger when Izuku easily blocked his attack, producing flaming daggers from his hands and slashing at Bakugo. The two traded glancing blows until Bakugo kicked Izuku back. Grinning as one of his gauntlets flashed red, it's ready. What's prepared? Tensed and prepared to block anything Bakugo sent after him, Izuku asked. Bakugo leveled the gauntlet at Izuku, who tensed even more as a tiny pin emerged. You were making fun of these gauntlets before we started. Bakugo sneered, but if those nerds in the support department made these right, then they've been storing up my sweat for one big explosion. Bakugo, no, keep that pin off, you might murder him. As long as he dodges, he won't die. Izuku quickly summoned a shield of fire in front of him, but Bakugo's defense was overpowered, and he was sent flying back as the explosion tore through the building's side. Bakugo laughed as he pulled the pin and sent a powerful explosion at Izuku. What on earth was that? Iida questioned, broken from his monologue as the building shook. Uraraka quickly turned on her radio. Izuku, what happened? She called over the radio. Izuku. How are you doing, young Midoriya? Come on in, Midoriya. Kirishima shook his head as All Might called into the radio. Man, that was powerful. There's no way Midoriya's walking away from that without an injury. Kirishima was concerned. Why even use that, Bakugo? He might have murdered him, Kaminari cried out. What if he had struck a load-bearing wall, endangering the rest of the building as well? Yaoyorozu was anxious. Su stated plainly, I don't think he cares so long as he wins. He had faith that Izuku would be able to counter the explosion. According to Shoto, at the very least he should be safe from any severe burns. But that's not what he should be worried about. That concussive force in such a small space would still injure Midoriya. You're eliminated if you use those gauntlets once more, Bakugo. Attacks risk damaging the weapon you're meant to be defending while destroying the stronghold. Are you going to fuck me? Alright. Hey, you give up, shit Deku? Izuku's eyes slowly opened to reveal him lying face down on the ground, a high-pitched ringing echoing in his ears. He groaned and pushed himself to his feet, his costume a little ragged and covered in soot, but not the worse for wear. He turned to face Bakugo, frowning in bewilderment as the boy appeared to be shouting at him, his voice muffled and distant. He was finally starting to hear what was being said as the ringing subsided. Up, Deku. Send it in, young Midoriya. Are you okay? I'm going to break up the fight, so stay still. Izuku slurred, fine, don't stop the fight. Midoriya, you don't sound good. Over the radio, Uraraka said anxiously, perhaps you ought to tune in to All Might. As Bakugo exploded in his direction, Izuku commanded, assuming his stance, I said don't stop the fight. Deku, you must learn to stay down. Bakugo growled and cocked his fist back, but Izuku's sweeping kick sent him tumbling across the ground, his eyes wide as he rolled away. Izuku was suddenly leaping at him, stomping his foot down where he had been before hitting him with more fire. Izuku gave him no space to move as he launched the attack, letting his rage feed his fire with a righteous rage in his eyes. Bakugo began using the extra space to his advantage, dancing around Izuku and hitting him with ranged attacks before moving again. Bakugo used his explosions to propel himself away from Izuku, flying backwards up the stairs and into the larger fourth floor room. Izuku was hot on his heels and forced back into a defensive position. Izuku lets out a puff of fire from his mouth in frustration, then spins around on his shoulders and twists his hips, sending flames spiraling out around him as he spins. Bakugo is clipped in the side and the room is filled with fire, and Izuku leaps back to his feet, launching a flaming whip at his opponent with a flick of his wrist. The fire is warm to the touch as it lashes towards Bakugo's neck. As Izuku thrusts his whip forward once more, Bakugo narrowly dodges it and lifts his arm, his eyes widening as he notices a crack in his gauntlet that is already leaking nitroglycerin. Bakugo began, Deku wait, but it was too late because the liquid was touched by the flames and the building's foundation shook with an explosion. Uraraka gets the advantage she needed to finally seize the bomb as the building trembles, saying, I got it. Uraraka rejoiced as Iida approached her and put on his helmet, and she cheered as All Might declared the heroes the winners. Congratulations, you did well today, he said kindly. Medical bots must be sent to the fourth floor immediately. Uraraka and Iida exchanged glances before Uraraka hurried to the stairs and thundered down them just in time to see their friend's condition. Oh no, Uraraka whispered. Bakugo was lying face down on the floor, covered in burns and coughing weakly as he forced himself to crawl towards Izuku, while Izuku was lying back against the wall, his uniform covered in dark soot and several fresh cuts and lacerations from the now destroyed gauntlet. Both were barely conscious on the ground. He rasped, Deku, Deku. Goddamn it, you moron, Izuku responded to me. I tried to warn you, you dipshit, I tried. He snapped, his body starting to shake at the sight of Izuku, eyes closed and motionless. Fuck. Bakugo stopped when Izuku coughed and said, I didn't know what you were yelling. Izuku glared at Bakugo while cracking an eye open and whispering in a hoarse voice. Ears were still fucked from the first explosion. You're lucky your gear kept you from third-degree burns. Yeah. Guess I'm lucky, huh? Fuck me, I'm tired, Bakugo moaned as he forced himself to roll onto his back, staring at the ceiling while Uraraka and Iida fussed over them. You still ain't shit, Deku. Bakugo let his body collapse and gave a feeble laugh. Hey, I recognize Kachan. Iida and Uraraka accompanied the medical bots as they loaded the two onto stretchers and headed to Recovery Girl. She tutted as she kissed Izuku, who grimaced in discomfort as skin knitted itself back together. The worst of his wounds soon healed, leaving behind a new scar that began at the left corner of his jaw and extended up to his nose. You got lucky. The older woman reprimanded Bakugo as she kissed him, causing the young man to sigh in relief as his burns vanished. Minor burns and exhaustion for you, Bakugo, but Midoriya, those lacerations won't be healing completely. When Uraraka and the elderly woman scowled at Izuku, he sighed and winced, saying, that's a downer. What? It's not like I intended for that grenade to blow up. Yeah, Bakugo concurred, I have no idea how the leak occurred. Be that as it may, I want you two to understand the severity of these wounds. you could have easily lost a limb from this. As recovery girls slapped him on the back of the head, Izuku mumbled, wincing, but we didn't. Okay, ow. Iida added, she's right, Midoriya, you shouldn't take this lightly. Yes. Uraraka repeated. After exchanging glances with Bakugo, Izuku remarked, we'll be more careful in the future. Bakugo laughed and winced as recovery girls slapped him too, saying, yeah, what the nerd said. You old hag. I concurred. Smack. Sonny, don't treat me disrespectfully. Bakugo rubbed his head and said, now, you two should be fine to head back to class, which infuriated recovery girl. Izuku stood up and walked towards the door, saying, thanks recovery girl. Bakugo complained as he followed his friend, with Iida and Uraraka trailing behind. That fight was intense. Uraraka sighed, causing Bakugo to become tense as he bumped into his side. Oh, did that hurt? No. He spoke defensively, which caused Uraraka to chuckle uneasily. Iida praised them both, saying, you two truly are tenacious if you're able to walk away from injuries like that. They glared at one another as they chanted, I've had worse. Stop imitating me. Tick marks appeared as they chorused once more. Deku, you're just like me from our younger days. Like I'd want to copy you second place. Want to go nerd again? As Uraraka and Iida argued until they reached the observation deck, they both started to perspire. Midoriya. Bakugo. Kirishima ran up to the two and yelled, that fight was truly epic. The whole time, you guys kept us on the edge of our seats. Yes, Mina exclaimed, you guys were fantastic. Sero remarked, I honestly thought he had you there for a second, Bakugo, but you were matching him blow for blow. Mina exclaimed, and you both looked awesome, once more. Aoyama began, you both looked fabulous, but Mina interrupted him. She said, you guys looked so awesome. All right students. Let's continue on with the lesson. All Might summoned the class to settle down, laughing as he observed their interactions. The MVP for that last match was Iida Tenya. Can anyone tell me why? He asked. Izuku, wincing a little, found a place to sit while Yaoyorozu explained why Iida was the MVP. Izuku jumped when Todoroki said stoically, you did good out there. Izuku was unaware that the boy was standing next to him. He said sheepishly, thanks. To be honest, I'm surprised that things didn't go badly. Before Izuku could respond, Todoroki said, it usually does with fire, and left. Izuku muttered, I guess he's had some bad experiences. His hand involuntarily moved to a small burn on his forearm. You all right, Midoriya? As he approached with Bakugo and Uraraka, Iida questioned him. Izuku smiled strangely and said, fine, tired. Who's up next? Team B versus Team I. Uraraka replied, kinda worried. Todoroki gives off a very indifferent vibe. Bakugo sneered at the monitors and said, he's definitely confident. Smug, icy hot bastard. A hero should never injure another student, Iida began. Is it possible to have 4 eyes? Bakugo let out a bark. 4 eyes. Enough, Izuku ordered, causing both boys to turn to face their agitated friend who was seated against the wall. Sheesh, you two are yelling right next to me, and my concussion hasn't even fully healed. Sorry, Midoriya, Iida said, bowing slightly. Wuss. Bakugo sneered, but as the next battle started, he made no attempt to resume the fight. Izuku saw Shoji move forward and use his other arms to keep an eye on the building. Shoji told Todoroki something, and there was a pause. When Todoroki froze the entire building, Izuku muttered, his eyes narrowing, what are you doing? As everyone gaped. He shivered as memories of unrelenting cold flashed through his mind, and he turned to face Bakugo, who met his gaze. Both had recognized the display of power and its message. Holy, began Kaminari. It's excessive, Jiro muttered. Mina yelled, he's completely immobilized Ojiro and Hagakure. As Todoroki approached Ojiro within 3 feet, Izuku scoffed and said, not true. He got everyone's attention by saying, his plan is flawed, he only froze their feet, so if he gets too close to one of them they may be able to get capture tape around them. Not only that, but Ojiro's tail is unfrozen, and has an even farther reach than his arms. All Ojiro would have to do is gut check him with his tail and wrap the capture tape around him. Izuku sighed in disappointment as they all turned back to the monitors to watch Todoroki walk past Ojiro and touch the weapon, saying, he got psyched out. With a cool look at Izuku, Yaoyorozu remarked, as heroes, if we can psyche out the enemy, then we have a chance to end a confrontation before any lives are lost. Sometimes that's all that's needed. And on the flip side, if that wasn't a weapon, but a VIP, Then a psyched-out hero gets people killed. Izuku sighed. Since most people had not considered the opposing viewpoint of the battle trial, everyone appeared in disbelief. Sero remarked, "Dude, you're smart. I used to psyche people out all the time. A little flame and an intense stare tend to get results," shrugged Izuku. "And what outcomes did you hope to achieve?" Yaoyorozu gave a contemptuous sniff. As Todoroki and the others returned, Izuku muttered, "Whatever was needed, princess." Izuku then turned away and watched the battle trials, squirming sympathetically as Yaoyorozu was essentially forced to face Jiru and Kaminari by herself because her partner was only happy to observe her work and sneer at her. Izuku walked to the locker rooms after the final after-action report was completed and All Might left, but he didn't change. Instead, he just sat on one of the benches and listened to everyone talk. When the last person got out of the shower, he got up and moved in that direction. Apprehensive Midoriya. Strong, but worried about size, knew you were overcompensating, Mineta said in an attempt to make fun of him as he went by. Careful Mineta, Izuku sneered, causing a flame to sprout from his fingertips. Playing with fire is dangerous. Izuku turned to face Mineta, who froze under the unexpectedly cold glare. He then extinguished the fire and continued to walk. While Bakugo and Kirishima were laughing at the pop-off student, Kaminari remarked, "Dude, you have no preservation skills." "Shush, shut up, it's merely a show," Mineta whimpered, attempting to conceal his terror. "Dude, he psyched you out." That was the topic of Midoriya's conversation. Kaminari's eyes widened as she spoke. Bakugo scoffed, shouldering his bag as he left, saying, "No shit Sparky." Iida started by glaring at Mineta and making him shrink. "While I won't condone your distasteful and rude comment," Iida added, "I also can't just let Midoriya's actions slide. That could have been interpreted as a threat." As Tokiyami buttoned his shirt, he remarked, "I think it was merely a warning. Our schoolmate is a secretive one, with many scars. Both physical and mental. So deep." Kirishima grinned and added, "I agree. If Midoriya doesn't want to take a shower or undress with us, then that's his decision, not that it's against the rules, isn't it?" Mineta complained, still a little weird. Following Sero out, Sato remarked, "At least he's not a perv." Before long, the locker room was deserted, save for the sound of the shower. It turned off after a few minutes, and Izuku left, taking in his surroundings before going to his locker, unlocking it, and taking his belongings out. He put on his pants as the door opened, and Todoroki entered, already dressed and examining his phone. He stopped when he noticed the marks on his back and looked up. "Midoriya, I forgot that I wanted to ask you," in his words. Izuku hurriedly turned around and muttered, "Shit," as he picked up his undershirt and put it on. "I thought everyone was gone." "Sorry," he said, turning away from Todoroki to finish getting dressed. Unsure of what to say, Todoroki began, "Midoriya." "Who? Why?" as the boy completed dressing. Izuku said curtly, "Forget it." He threw on his jacket and walked past Todoroki, who shook his head and hurried after him. "How am I going to forget that?" Following Izuku down the hall, Todoroki demanded to know, "Midoriya, is everything okay at home?" Izuku yelled, "Look, this happened a long time ago. The people who did it aren't on the street anymore, so just drop it." Izuku did not turn to face Todoroki. "Everything's fine." Todoroki began, but stopped when Kaminari and Ochako rounded the corner. Ochako chirped, "Hey guys, I was wondering where you guys were. Everything okay?" Izuku grinned wearily and said, "Everything's fine. Just had a little trouble getting dressed, muscles stiff and all you know." "There's a good spot in Hiyashi," Kaminari said sagely, "a good massage would help you bro." Izuku walked past them and into the classroom, dismissing them with the words, "I'll be fine. But it looks like you guys were busy, so I'll see ya." As he and Ochako continued to walk, Kaminari questioned, "A little squirrely, isn't he?" "Yeah, but you can't fault him for it, true." For a while, Todoroki stood in the hallway, trying to control his thoughts and feelings as he entered the classroom. He glanced at Midoriya, who was only partially paying attention to a story Kirishima was narrating. His eyes were far away. Nervous, Todoroki sat down at his desk and decided to at least inform their homeroom teacher of what he had witnessed. Izuku was among the first to leave the room when the bell rang, quietly apologizing to his friends before heading out. Although they were understandably perplexed, they dismissed it as their friend's day's fatigue. Todoroki, however, was wiser. He walked down the hall to the teacher's office as soon as he could, stopping briefly at the sliding door before knocking. Present Mike's voice yelled, "Come in," as Todoroki took over, turning his attention from the boisterous hero to his homeroom teacher. With weary eyes, Aizawa asked, "Todoroki, what do you need?" observing the boy's clumsy and uncertain posture. I saw something today, and I think I need to inform you about it. It's about Midoriya." After exchanging glances with Mike, Aizawa turned back to his pupil and said, "Go on." Midoriya waited to change until most everyone was finished, Todoroki said, "and I was needing to ask him a question, so I returned to the locker room. And well, I saw scars on Midoriya's back, whip marks and carvings and a brand." Mike said uneasily, "I'm going head out. You got this one, Shota?" As Mike left, Aizawa continued to look at Todoroki and said, "Yeah, I got it. Have a seat, Todoroki." Aizawa gestured to a chair across from him, and the boy sat down appreciatively. The majority of them are officers in the correctional field, the Hero Association, and the teaching staff here at UA. The only reason I'm telling you this is so you don't bother Izuku with your inquiries. Understand? Now, only a few people know of Izuku's past. Aizawa starts, Todoroki raising an eyebrow at the familiarity. Dutifully, Todoroki replied, "Yes, sir." Aizawa breathed a sigh of relief. Izuku has been in and out of the juvenile detention center his whole life. Usually problems with his foster families have landed him in the facility. "Hold on, is Midoriya in foster care?" Todoroki paused in surprise. "Yes, one of these foster families thought he was a demon since he was 5 years old and tried to rid him of it." He muttered, "They did all of that to him?" "Yes, we only know so much. Bastards were tight-lipped about their treatment and Izuku has only said so much about it. I didn't know about the brand for one thing. But I know it was a traumatic experience for him. So I want you to promise you won't bring this up again unless he broaches the subject himself, understood?" "Yes sir, I understand." "Good, I'm trusting you to keep this a secret, Todoroki. If it gets out, then I know who to look at," Aizawa said, glaring at him wearily. I promise I won't tell anyone. Thank you, Mr. Aizawa." Breathing heavily, Izuku rushed into his apartment and slammed the door behind him. He was surprised that Todoroki had not cornered him because he had seen him jump up shortly after. He took a trembling breath and slowly lowered himself to the floor, crossing his legs beneath him and assuming the stance uncle had taught him for meditation. He struggled to focus as images of a knotted whip slicing across his back, agonized cries as they drove a sharp knife into his shoulder, and the smell of burning flesh as a branding iron was pressed into his side raced through his head. A locked door and the bitter cold of a metal room. When Aizawa opened the apartment door a few hours later, she saw Izuku lying on the floor, unconscious and in a deep, restless sleep. Aizawa sighed and picked up the boy, carrying him to his room and setting him on the bed. He was afraid that the tiny sparks would ignite on his fingers, so he dared not cover him. "Get some sleep, son," he muttered as he left, head hung low and heart heavy. It had been this way for a week, with Izuku trying his best to ignore Todoroki in class and avoiding his attempts outside of it. Izuku entered the classroom, said a few hellos as he made his way to his desk, and pointedly ignored Todoroki's attempts to get his attention. Fortunately, Todoroki didn't try to make friends outside of class. When others tried to question Izuku about the two's behavior around one another, they were met with a dismissive wave of the hand. He'd smile casually and say, "Nothing's going on, guys, don't worry about it." The boy would always pause before telling them to leave, but any attempts to ask Todoroki were also dismissed. The class decided to disregard it in light of this, though Uraraka would occasionally try. Like any other day, Izuku immediately started talking to Bakugo about the upcoming family dinner that his mother wanted him to attend. Everyone was forced to face the front as soon as Aizawa entered the room and yelled, "Quiet down. Okay, so we have a lot to cover today, first being, you need to choose a class representative." Immediately, there was a commotion in the room. Choose me," Kaminari yelled. "I'd like to represent my class." "No way, it should be me," Mineta screamed before Sero pushed her back. "Please, everyone, relax," Iida called out, standing. "We should do this democratically, a vote to decide who should be our representatives." Jiru remarked, "We've only known each other as weak dude." Mina concurred, saying, "Yeah, we wouldn't know each other well enough." Kirishima noted, and most everyone would probably elect themselves. When Iida said, "Then those who gain more than one vote would obviously be more qualified to lead," some people began nodding in agreement. For his part, Midoriya was attempting absently to balance the tip of his pencil on his pinky, scowling whenever the pencil fell over and he had to start over. Izuku spared her a glance as Uraraka gushed at his side, Kind of exciting, huh, Midoriya? Izuku scowled as the pencil fell once more and remarked, it's just extra work. I'd rather have more time to train. Izuku winced and Uraraka jumped when Iida yelled, okay. Everyone, write down your vote. Sue. If you would be so kind as to collect everyone's vote. Aizawa recorded the results 20 minutes later, showing that only 4 individuals received multiple votes. Alright. The vote passes, Midoriya, your class representative. Aizawa responded, and Yaoyorozu will be. Everyone gasped when Izuku said bluntly, I'll pass. Iida started to say, what? But Midoriya, it's an honor to be, but Izuku interrupted him. It's an honor I don't want, he said, honestly, I'm flattered so many of you think I'll be a good leader. But I don't want it, you really want the guy who doesn't want it to be your leader. He poked Iida with his thumb, give the position to Iida, he's the obvious choice. Mina said, that wouldn't be fair, yeah, we voted, so shouldn't Yaomomo be the class representative? Izuku said, I really couldn't care less, if you want to do another vote then be my guest. Lunch was signaled by the ringing bell. Aizawa said wearily, we'll finish this later, go get lunch. As Izuku packed up his belongings, everyone quietly chatted among themselves as they left the room. As Iida approached his friend, he said, thank you, Midoriya. I know that I probably won't get many votes except for yours, but thank you for the endorsement. He slung his backpack over his shoulder and said, I have to get somewhere, so see ya. Izuku smiled at him and said, don't worry about it, man. You're the best person I think for the job. I'm sure everyone else will figure that out too. Enjoy your midday meal, Midoriya. Iida shouted, then followed the others to the lunchroom, with Izuku going in a different direction, frowning and with his hands in his pockets. How do you all feel about Midoriya's remarks? Uraraka motioned for Bakugo and Sue to take a seat at the table. HMPH, nerds right. Bakugo replied bluntly, 4 eyes may be annoying, but he'd be a good representative just like I would be. Sue stated bluntly, causing a checkmark to appear, yeah, but no one would be able to put up with your attitude for long. Watch out, Frog, I'll be elected, and you'll have to take back what you said. I doubt it. Sue replied, back to the point, I agree, Iida would be a great rep, he really does care about our class excelling after all. However, you would also make a good one, Uraraka complained, I'm not sure who to vote for anymore. Who did you vote for the previous time? Iida approached Uraraka and sat down next to him, asking. I didn't think Izuku would decline the job, so I voted for him. She sighed and turned to face Iida. So, do you think you'd be a good Iida representative? Although I would like to think that I would, I'm confident that the person our class votes for will be ideal for the position if they don't choose me. Bakugo sneered as he said, proudly. Bakugo sneered, spoken like a true private school nerd. A private school. Gazing at Iida, who was scolding Bakugo for his remarks, Uraraka pondered. Come to think of it, you do seem to have that elite school mentality. Sue replied, and I think I've heard the name Iida before. Admit it. You're filthy rich. Uraraka leaned in Iida's direction, causing Sue and Bakugo to perspire. I wouldn't say that, but Sue is right, Iida replied, his chest expanding. My last name belongs to the Iida family. A family who has a staunch tradition of being heroes. Bakugo complained, you're related to Ingenium, ain't you 4 eyes? TCH, knew it. Yes, he is my brother, also, my name is Tenya Iida, there is no need for name calling. I'll call you whatever I want, nerd. Before the argument could start, Sue interrupted and said, he's the hero in Hosu, isn't he? The one with 67 sidekicks? That he is. It is my goal to one day work alongside him. A true Iida man. Uraraka exclaimed, wow Iida. You have such great goals, as Bakugo complained. Bakugo grinned arrogantly and said, I guess that's nice and all, but you won't be number 1. Y'all hear me, that's me. Sue deadpanned, didn't Izuku beat you twice already? He got lucky frog. Bakugo frowned as the others at the table laughed, but deep down he felt comforted by the presence of people who weren't scared to make fun of him. Better than those extras at Mustafu. He pondered. Before I forget, where is Midoriya? Iida responded, I would have thought he'd show up by now. Uraraka looked around and thought, he usually does right, perhaps he needed to use the restroom. A woman's voice called over the speakers as the intercom abruptly came to life with a generic alarm. Alarm. A level 3 breach has occurred. Every student starts the evacuation procedure right away. Iida asked a third-year student who was passing by, what's going on? He exclaimed, someone has broken into the campus. We had better leave since this hasn't happened in my 3 years here. Everyone, let's hurry, Iida yelled, guiding Uraraka and Sue out the door with Bakugo right behind them. Before long, terrified students were pushing and jostling them all. Everybody, relax. As he was crushed between a bunch of guys, Iida yelled. Stop being a purple-balled jerk. Mineta was sobbing and clinging to Bakugo when he yelled at her. Ow, hey, stop, eep. Uraraka squealed as she jumped away. Stop. This'll get their attention. Bakugo growled as he reached a wall and kicked Mineta off as he looked around, his hands already reaching up to detonate an explosion. However, he stopped when Iida abruptly flew over everyone, his engines sending him hurtling toward the wall, where he crashed in a humorous pose. Stop, everyone. There is no need to panic, Iida yelled, releasing the entire hall. Please calm down and demonstrate to the reporters from this morning how appropriate UA students handle such circumstances. As everyone started to move, Bakugo approached Uraraka slowly and grinned, saying, Look at that. 4 Eyes actually had the balls to do that. Uraraka smiled back at him. Yes. Bakugo tilted his head as she said, Oh, it's the glasses. I noticed you preparing to do something as well, explosion? Bakugo shrugged and said, Thought it would get these extras to shut up for a moment and calm down. I'm glad we had a backup plan, but I'm not sure how well that would have worked. She gave him a shoulder punch as she cheered. With a faint flush starting to appear on his cheeks, Bakugo glanced at Uraraka and then at his shoulder. Hey, yeah. He coughed as Uraraka started to leave, utterly unaware of his response. Get moving. Come on, let's go. Following her, Bakugo muttered, Yeah, whatever. He hardly noticed his own faint smile. The reporters were instructed to return to their classes after being cleared from the campus. Izuku was already waiting there, looking around bewildered. Hello, Deku. The boy turned to face Bakugo as he growled, Where the hell were you? Izuku scratched the back of his head in shame and admitted, I was eating on the roof. He began to meditate and kind of lost track of time, and if it weren't for that girl, he would have been late. Why, what happened? As the others chatted among themselves, Uraraka told him. Looking at his friends, Izuku rubbed his neck and remarked, That sounds crazy. It must have been terrifying. It kinda was, Uraraka acknowledged, but Iida had a plan. As she walked past the students and opened the door, Aizawa droningly said, Enough. Get inside, we still have plenty to do before this afternoon's training. Okay. We still need 2 representatives, the teacher said as the class was soon seated. Iida is my nominee. Uraraka dialed. Yes, Kirishima agreed, saying, the way the guy took control of the situation in the hallway was really manly. He made everyone quiet and pay attention. Did you notice that when he struck the wall, he resembled the person in charge of the emergency exit? Iida received 3 votes, Aizawa sighed. Izuku held his pencil up in the air and said, 4. All right. Anyone else want to vote? The final tallies were obtained after another half hour, and Iida received 5 votes, Yaoyorozu received 4, and Bakugo received 2. Okay. Now that we're set with that, all of you get your costumes. We have rescue training this afternoon, so make sure you bring your A game. As everyone started to move, Izuku was among the last to pick up his case. Midoriya. Izuku stopped when he heard Yaoyorozu's hesitant voice. He turned to face the slightly taller girl, who appeared uncertain. Yeah, he asked. With hesitation, she questioned, Is there a reason you didn't think I wouldn't be a good representative? He raised an eyebrow and questioned, I never said that, did I? You implied it. With a sigh, Izuku combed his hair and asked, Do we have to do this now? He nearly whimpered, Kinda gotta get dressed. I just want to know, I understand that we butted heads back in the team battles but. With his case slung over his shoulder, Izuku muttered, That has nothing to do with it. Look, don't take this the wrong way, but you're kind of a pushover. What? I'm not, she said angrily. Really? Because I've watched you go to great lengths to win people over the past week, he shot back, and you've given in almost every time Mina or Hagakure pushed you even a little. And for a representative who might have to make a difficult decision, that is not encouraging. Well, she held back. As he walked past her on his way to the door, he sighed, saying, Look, I don't have anything against you personally, and I'll even admit that there are subjects that you'd run circles around me with. But I grew up on the streets, and I know what happens when you have a leader who isn't commanding enough. Who knows, maybe you'll prove me wrong, put someone under stress, and you learn more about them, right? You grew up on the streets? Yaoyorozu asked, turning to face him. She questioned, Why? As he continued out the door, Izuku said with a sorrowful smile, "See you Yaoyorozu. Not everyone gets saved by heroes." Just as the bus arrived, Izuku reached the others. "Hey Midoriya." As he approached, Uraraka said, "Are you prepared for today?" "Yep." Izuku remarked, glancing at Bakugo, who had his arms folded, "You're looking sour." Then Bakugo complained, "I'm not." Uraraka laughed and said, "He's sad that he didn't get class representative." "I'm not. Anyway, who cares about that?" A tick mark appeared on Bakugo's forehead as he yelled. Izuku teased, "Keep telling yourself that, number 2. As Iida started to lead them onto the bus, Bakugo frowned and said, "You're lucky the old hag has a soft spot for you." Before long, they were moving. "So Midoriya," Sue started out by saying, "I'm pretty blunt with my thoughts and feelings, and it occurred to me that your power has a lot of similarities with Endeavor." Izuku chuckled. "I guess we both use fire," he thought, "but there's a difference. I can control other sources to an extent and summon lightning." "By the way, how do you do that?" Cutting the fire user off, Kaminari asks eagerly, "Do you have 2 quirks?" No, just the one," he assured me, "but the man who trained me to control my quirk told me that since it's my body's natural energy that produces fire, that with proper focus and peace of mind, I can expel the energy in its purest form." "Who trained you?" With his eyes narrowed at Izuku's hesitation, Shoto asked inquisitively. Izuku chuckled softly as she said, "His name was Iroh Soren. He was my foster father for about 3 years, and even though everyone knows him as Uncle Iroh, he's a good guy." "You're in foster care, what?" When Mineta yelled, his loud voice caused everyone to recoil. "Yes, tell me about it." Izuku glared at the boy, who flinched away as he asked. "That must have been awful, dude," Kirishima cried out. "It wasn't so bad in some places." Izuku responded with honesty, "I actually made a lot of friends. Wonder what they're doing right about now." "Did any of them look cute?" Izuku shuddered a little as Mina asked with a cunning grin. "How am I supposed to know?" Izuku inquired. Before Mina could say anything more, Yaoyorozu cut her off, saying, "So you had actual training from someone. It explains why you're so confident using your quirk. For instance, he made his arm harden." Kirishima remarked, "Yeah, he's easily one of the strongest guys in class. Flashy quirk too, better than what I got. You can take a hit, right? It might not be showy, and you'd be great for rescues," Izuku inquired. "You truly believe that?" "No so man. If we're gonna talk about flashy then we should be looking at Todoroki and Bakugo." Sue continued, "But I don't think Bakugo would be too popular with his attitude." "Frog. What the hell do you mean? You see what I mean?" Bakugo started pouting as everyone laughed, saying, "Yeah dude, we've only known you for a week and we all know your attitude is akin to a dirty sock." Bakugo glared at Izuku, who covered his snigger. "Shut it Deku." Izuku replied with a laugh, "I said nothing." Aizawa called back, "Enough, we're here." In awe of the facility, they all gathered and formed a line at the doors. Looking around, Izuku whistled. "Wow, it resembles a theme park," Uraraka cried out. "It's not just an amusement park at all." A fresh voice called out, causing the class to turn to watch. "Where is All Might at 13? Aizawa inquired. "He had a bit of trouble this morning," he said, raising 3 fingers. "He's not gonna make it." "TCH, how irresponsible. Well then, I guess we better get started." "Alright, so, I'm Pro Hero 13, as some of you may know. The Unforeseen Simulation Joint welcomes you. I built his facility myself to impart the fundamentals of rescue training to aspiring heroes." "Wicked cool. United Studios Japan, or USJ? Can someone now explain how my quirk functions?" Uraraka raises her hand. Giddy as 13 asks. "Black hole is the name of your peculiarity, and it can dissect anything down to the molecular level," she exclaimed. "True. Many of your quirks can be used to inflict injury upon each other, and it is our job to teach you how to avoid that and utilize your quirk to benefit those around you," 13 said, adding that, "Even though it can help move debris, it can just as easily be used to harm." Everyone exchanged confused looks. Izuku nodded and thought, "It's like my fire." He looked down at his hand and realized that, if he wasn't careful, he could literally melt the villain bot's armor off. "Anyway, let's start," and 13 paused as the lights around them began to flicker. Mr. Aizawa, is this part of the training?" Aizawa asked, squinting his eyes as he ran to the edge of the stairs and saw a black portal appear. As individuals start leaving through the portal, Kirishima asks cautiously. "No 13, everyone should leave. Those people are true villains." Aizawa elevated his goggles and yelled. All Might is where? I was told he would be here. Perhaps we should kill a few brats to get him here. A man with hands all over his body said, as if addressing no one in particular. How did they enter this place? Don't we have alarms? Izuku demanded, assuming a fighting stance. They may have an electric-type user jamming the signal, Kaminari. See if you can't get in touch with the school. We do, Aizawa muttered. Oh right. Kaminari exclaimed as he tinkled with his monitor. Get them back to the buses, and I'll keep them away from 13. All right, let's follow me. Izuku moved to stand next to Aizawa, who was already in his stance, as everyone ran. No, said Aizawa sternly, drawing Izuku's attention. Go defend your classmates. Izuku protested, you can't possibly handle them all on your own. I'm not planning to. As soon as you all get clear then I'm leaving too. Besides, we need the strongest in the class to protect the others. I'm counting on you, son. After hesitating, Izuku nodded. As Aizawa dove into the villains, he said, don't die. And then took off in the direction of the others. Izuku was overtaken by shadows before he could reach his other companions. No, he yelled as he abruptly dropped through empty air, heading directly for the flood zone. He struck the water so forcefully that he had to expel the air from his lungs. A man with a shark quirk yelled, sorry kid, but we're getting paid for this, and rushed in the direction of the thrashing fire user. Only to have a familiar face kick them to the side. Sue threw him out of the water and wrapped her tongue around his middle, calling out, hey Midoriya. Izuku coughed as he gulped down air greedily as he crashed onto the deck of a cruise ship. Mineta was also slapped down onto the deck as he looked up. Sue easily jumped on. As he leaned back against the wall and concentrated his inner fire until the water started to evaporate from his skin, he croaked, thanks Sue. As Sue put it, this is crazy, isn't it? No problem. Izuku sneered, you can say that again, and walked to the ship's edge while glancing at the villains encircling it. These assholes are just waiting, he muttered, glancing at his fellow students. With tears streaming down the boy's cheeks, Mineta frantically asked, why are they even here? What did we ever do to them? Izuku sighed, hunching over and glancing at his fellow countrymen, I'm assuming they're here to kill All Might. That hand freak was asking for him, and since he's not here his next step is to kill some of us and see if it will lure All Might here. Sue concluded, which is why they split us up. Exactly, but I don't think they know about our quirks. Otherwise they would have sent you to the conflagration zone. And you to the blizzard zone. Izuku felt frightened. We need to figure out a way to get out of here. They won't wait for long. What are your quirks? Sue declared, my quirk is frog. I can do pretty much anything a frog can do, including jump high, stick to surfaces, and shoot my tongue quite far. I can also throw up my stomach to clean it and secrete a poisonous mucus, though it only stings a little. Actually, you can forget those last two, they're not helpful here. Izuku reached over and slammed a fist into the boy's head, causing him to collapse to the ground as Mineta whispered, mucus, in a strange voice. Firebending, Izuku muttered, I can summon lightning, but I'm not sure how that will affect them. You guys already know my quirk. We do not yet wish to murder them. Yet, with fear in his eyes, Mineta asked. Sue agreed with Izuku when he said, I think we have a choice right now, but sometimes there's no choice. Izuku said, yeah. What's your quirk, Mineta? I have these sticky balls. He said, removing one from his head, there's no real limit to them, and they can stick to just about anything. Except me. I just bounce off of them. Anyways, they stay sticky anywhere from a couple of hours to a full day depending on what I've eaten and how I feel. That's useful. Izuku nodded and glanced over the edge once more. Okay, here's how it's gonna go. I'm going to unleash some fire. Get a smokescreen going. Sue, as soon as there's enough cover grab Mineta and get him to shore. Mineta, throw some of your balls at the villains. We can at the very least trap a few of them, understood? Sue said, got it. Are you sure we shouldn't just wait here for All Might? Mineta responded, I mean, they can't really beat him, can they? Izuku put a hand on the shorter boy's shoulder and said, don't worry though, I'm sure we'll all get out of this just fine. We don't know that for sure. Izuku shook his head and said, if they say they're here to kill All Might then they probably have a way. Mineta nodded and inhaled deeply. With a slightly distorted light in his eyes and his lips curled into a snarl, Izuku jumped up onto the rail and said, alrighty boys and girls. He was addressing both them and the villains as he did so. Let's get this party started, he said. As he swept the flames through the water, Izuku inhaled deeply and sent a wave of hot fire into the water, sending steam shooting into the sky and forcing several villains to flee. Sue. Go. An order came from Izuku. Sue replied, on it, before leaping into the air and encircling Mineta with her tongue. Mineta called out, eat my sticky balls, and started tossing his balls into the water. One villain yelled, what the they won't come off, as his leg and arm adhered to his body, colliding with another villain, who was immediately pinned to him. The villain cried out, what are these things as the flames spread across them. Izuku grinned and said, sorry boys, as he leapt into the air, shooting jets of fire from his fist and pursuing Sue. Didn't mean to broil you. As they touched down on shore, Sue congratulated them, saying, that worked out even better than I thought it would. Looks like we passed the shipwreck zone. As Izuku regained control of his breathing, he sighed, we're far from finished. We need to get back to the stairs. But I want to check on Mr. Aizawa before we do. He may need help. Mineta complained, we should just head for the stairs since we can't actively combat these bad guys. I'm not talking about actively fighting. Izuku sighed. I say we just skirt the edge of the courtyard. If he's doing fine we won't help. But if he's being overwhelmed then we can easily take a few out without being seen. As they started to move, Sue remarked, I hope you know what you're doing. Same here Sue, he said with a sardonic laugh. After the media broke in, All Might went and exceeded his time limit, and now he was fighting for his life against an unknown number of villains with his students dispersed to the winds. Aizawa was not having a good day. He had to get this fight over with, and fast. When the hand guy charged at him, he growled, final boss. He met him halfway and erased his quirk by wrapping him in his capture scarf. Aizawa closed his eyes and the man effortlessly slipped out of the strands to reach him. As his elbow started to rot away, Aizawa let out a painful gasp, erased the man's quirk once more, and leapt away. As he watched Aizawa take down 2 more grunts, he started, it was difficult to tell with all that jumping around, but when you use your quirk, your hair starts to float. You have no protection when it isn't floating. You are as good as a child with no peculiarities. Yes, but I'm not the last boss. Aizawa screamed in agony as the bird-beaked monster suddenly appeared behind him and slammed him into the ground, breaking his other arm as he did so. The monster repeatedly slammed his head into the ground, shattering the concrete as it did so. I erased his quirk, I'm sure of it, Aizawa thought as it grabbed a fistful of his hair and snapped his arm like a twig, indicating that his base strength was equal to All Might's. It screamed in agony and leapt away as golden flames swept over its body. What? Before the flames could reach him, the leader screamed and leapt away as well. Izuku took a defensive position in front of Aizawa, growling, you guys are done. Sue and Mineta rushed to Aizawa's side. Sue started examining the teacher as Aizawa moaned, get to the entrance, now. As Mineta frantically danced from foot to foot, Sue worried, he's not doing so good Midoriya. The man sneered at Izuku's question, and these two won't just let us leave, am I right? I'm here to kill All Might and a couple of bratty kids, of course I won't just let you run away. Izuku said, avoiding a glance at Aizawa, and I for one can't just turn away after what you did to him. Sorry Dad, he roared, firing at the Nomu, who had tried to stumble forward while Izuku was preoccupied, causing it to fall back with a scream. Get Mr. Aizawa to the entrance now, I'll keep them away. But Mineta began, but Midoriya, right now. As the handman charged forward, Izuku growled and kicked at him, forcing him to avoid the flames and refocus his attack on the fire user. He growled, swiping at the boy who was able to easily dodge between the attacks before rolling to the side to avoid a strike from the Nomu, soaking it in flames before leaping back further. You're becoming a nuisance of an NPC. I'm glad I can establish a reputation against villains. Izuku smirked arrogantly and punched fire at the man, pushing him back toward the water. He then flipped the Nomu over and directed his hottest flames at its exposed brain, causing it to shriek in agony and hold its head as it stumbled back. This is my chance, Izuku thought, performing the gestures to call forth lightning. Nomu's fist finally made contact with his body, sending him hurtling into a low concrete wall that encircled the water fountain, only for a portal to open up at his side. Izuku moaned as his vision grew hazy and he made a futile attempt to stand up. The handman sneered, you, clean up this mess, we have bigger fish to fry than some NPC. A gravelly voice said, got it boss. As the wind whipped the area, Izuku slowly dragged himself to his knees and looked up shakily to see the Nomu and All Might clash in the air, creating strong gusts of wind pressure. A group of 6 villains were approaching in front of him, saying, hey Stone, this one's yours. Izuku assumed a fighting stance, his whole body trembling as blood started to pour into his eyes. The man in front of him was taller than he was, and his face was covered by a simple gray mask. Just a pair of black trousers. Izuku gradually focused on a well-known brand on the man's right arm. Across his brand. Izuku dropped his stance in surprise when the boy stopped and whispered, "Jin?" in a hoarse voice. Izuku stumbled back against the water fountain and the other boy, arms still up, asked uncertainly, Izuku? Yeah. It's me. The two gazed at one another for a short time, Jin motionless in his defensive position and Izuku covered in blood and hardly able to stand. What's the hold-up, Stone? Come on. He whirled around and stomped his foot into the ground as Jin sighed and muttered, "You owe me big time, Akuma." Move. Jin yells at Izuku as he stomps once more, causing the ground beneath the other villains to give and send them cascading into the newly made hole. A big boulder then erupts from the ground before a punch from him sends it flying at one of the bigger villains, bowling him over as Izuku ran to the right, Jin hot on his heels as he tears off the mask, exposing his rugged face and green eyes. Didn't think I'd ever see you again, Akuma. Jin was tinkering with the earth around him, sending boulders flying to knock down his former comrades or stomping and whirling his hands to trap them in earth. How'd you get mixed up with these guys, ya big teddy bear? Izuku wheezed out, a straight kick sending fire into a villain trying to jump at him, knocking him out with a quick burst of fire from his right hand. Jin shrugged and said, "Needed some street cred. I wouldn't have joined this if I knew you were going to be here." As they both eliminated the final villains, Izuku complained, "Isn't that a ringing endorsement?" Izuku looked around and narrowed his eyes when he noticed All Might imprisoned. "Jin," Izuku began. "That guy is Shigaraki, he's the head of this shit storm," Jin growls as he kicks the ground and sends a spike of rock straight at the hand guy, who jumped back in surprise. "I see it." Izuku screams, leaping into the air and kicking the man with a fiery axle kick. "Then I guess we know who to go for." The man avoids him and Kirishima's follow-up. As Bakugo tackles the warp gate user and Todoroki freezes the Nomu, the recently arrived hardening user moaned, "Damn, it almost had him." Todoroki glared at Shigaraki and sneered, "You thought you could kill the symbol of peace with such weak fighters? You're finished." Scratching at his neck, Shigaraki growls, No, 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 no. This isn't over just because some NPCs come whining. Nomu." As Nomu pulled itself out of the warp gate, they all watched in horror as its body broke apart from the ice and then quickly reformed. All Might stood tall and gritted his teeth, saying, "I thought you said his quirk was shock absorption." "I didn't say that was his only quirk." Shigaraki chuckled, "Now, you've made a right mess of things, all of you, and I'm going to be needing Kurogiri back." Nomu. Jin, who was closest to Bakugo, threw an uppercut and built a big rock wall, but he only covered his face as the Nomu easily sped through after he screamed. Jin exclaimed, "No way, that was bedrock," startled. Izuku exclaimed, "Kachan," but then turned to face Bakugo, who was now standing there looking shocked. "Are you okay?" Izuku asked anxiously as Jin rushed over. "I am an absolute nerd." "Who is this?" Izuku looked back to where Bakugo had been standing and saw All Might standing there with his arms raised in a protective guard. Jin waved awkwardly and said, "Hello, Jin here." Izuku shook his head. "You would so readily order a child's death?" All Might gave a growl. "Oh, stop being so arrogant, All Might. Your little fire user was killing people when he was battling Nomu and me. Isn't it odd that the only violence that is permitted is state-sponsored violence?" Jin and Bakugo anxiously checked on Izuku as he slowly fell to his knees, trying not to fall completely as the hero and villain exchanged jabs. "Don't screw up, Deku." Bakugo spat. "This isn't good, his ribcage is practically non-existent," Jin stated, looking at Bakugo, "and I'm not entirely sure but he may have a fracture in his skull." "Deku. Damn it," Bakugo complained. "Young Todoroki, I want you to return to the entrance with the others," All Might called to the boy, "ensure that young Midoriya arrives safely." Todoroki insisted, "You're sending us off? Your fight is over, please." Todoroki whispered, "You would have died by now if it weren't for me. And I thank you, but now it's time for you to witness a true pro at work." As Todoroki appeared to be about to argue, Bakugo yelled, "Hey, icy hot. Quit arguing, Deku's in bad shape." As All Might blasted off at the Nomu, Todoroki sighed and gestured for them to follow him. The two exchanged angry blows and once again bucked them with the strong wind pressure. Between them, Bakugo and Jin held Izuku up, and as Todoroki and Kirishima covered them, they moved swiftly and carefully to the stairs. As they moved, Izuku muttered, "Hey Jin, I'm sorry that I never went looking for you." Izuku forced himself to look up as All Might overpowered the Nomu. Don't worry about Dakuma, Jin assured him. I'm sorry I left you behind, now let's get you two. An explosion sent them to the ground. Jin immediately rolled back to his feet, and Bakugo followed suit next to him. The Nomu crashed through the USJ's roof as All Might roared, if 100% isn't enough to push you to your limit, then I'll go beyond that. I'll show you what it means to go beyond plus ultra. Whoa, no way. Jin exclaimed in amazement, he sent that thing flying. Now that's a pro, Kirishima exclaimed. As the other teachers arrived, they turned to face the entrance. As Shigaraki and Kurogiri vanished, All Might snorted, hey, back in my heyday, I could have finished a guy like that in 5 punches. But today it took over 300 mighty blows, he said, turning to face his students. And just in the nick of time too, huh, All Might? Izuku asked with a bloody grin as Midnight and Snipes ran up, laughing as he got to his feet. Snipes pointed his gun at Jin and said, this isn't a student, who knelt down and raised his hands. As they put him in handcuffs, Kirishima protested, he helped us though. Todoroki stated bluntly, he was still with the villains when they first attacked. As Izuku fell forward, the adrenaline rush that kept him awake fading, Kirishima yelled, but... oh shit, Midoriya. The last thing he saw was Jin looking at him fixedly. His eyes were filled with regret and concern. Izuku had a strong dislike for infirmaries. Nevertheless, it seemed like he had been spending most of his time in them lately. Being recovered from a battle, today was no exception. Except Recovery Girl wasn't the one who was waiting for him to awaken. Rather, he found himself staring at a man he had never seen before in the tiny principal. Nezu pleasantly clasped his hands in front of him and said, ah, young Midoriya, I'm glad you're awake. I was worried you would be under until tomorrow. How are things going for everyone? Izuku asked, gritting his teeth and wincing as the motion jarred his wounds. Leaning forward to gently push the boy back, Nezu reassured him, don't worry, they're all fine. And please don't move too much, because we wouldn't want Recovery Girl to storm in here now, would we? Right. Izuku said with a dry chuckle, eyes going to the other man, who's this? This is the pro hero Whiplash, he has a few questions for you, but they can wait if you're not feeling up to it. Paku stepped forward with a file in hand and said, Jin, Watanabe. He placed the file on Izuku's legs and said, Quirk. Earthbending. He's a known petty thug whose main charges usually consist of illegal quirk fighting and petty theft. How is it that you know him? Izuku said confidently, I can answer any questions you have. He looked down at the case file and sighed, we've known each other since we were younger. We were in the same foster home 4 years ago, and we ran the streets together for a while. You mean the Jones family? Nezu inquired. Yeah, those assholes. Izuku grumbled, me and Jin were their main targets, we wouldn't roll over when they asked. It only took a few months before Jin was planning on running away. I couldn't, but I helped him get out of there, didn't see him again until today. Never thought he'd go villain, he was always a big softy. Paku asks sharply, where were you during lunch today? According to multiple witnesses, you were not present in the cafeteria and didn't appear until after the alarm had been sounded. Izuku gave Paku a perplexed look and said, I was eating lunch on the roof. Do you think I have something to do with the break-in? Izuku asked. It would certainly fit. Paku grumbled, you just happened to be missing during a lunch period when the first level 3 alarm is triggered in years, no one to confirm or deny your location. Then your class is attacked, not only by villains, but by villains who know you personally. That is enough, Paku, abruptly responds Nezu, who is staring at the individual, cameras on the roof, as well as an eyewitness statement from a 1B student, verify his story. Unless you have proof that young Midoriya here had a hand in the breach other than a connection with a small-time criminal who turned sides to help the students, then I would like you to refrain from accusing my students of anything. Young Midoriya here has my full trust, old friend. I've interviewed all of your classmates, Paku said sternly, frowning but nodding. And I would like to ask where it was that you were warped to. Paku went on. Me, Sue, and Mineta were sent to the flood zone. Izuku murmured. We fought the villains there and went to the courtyard. Why return to the courtyard? Why not return to the stairs? Izuku inquired anxiously. I wanted to make sure Mr. Aizawa was okay. Is he okay? Nezu assured him, he'll be fine with some rest. His injuries were not life-threatening. That's good. The man shook his head when Nezu asked, any other questions, Paku? He turned and left the room, whispering, I have everything I need. Get some rest, hopefully you'll be out of here in no time. Nezu said, bowing slightly to Izuku. I apologize for him, He's not pleasant to be around at the best of times. Izuku muttered, "Thank you, sir." As Nezu walked away, he glanced up at the roof slowly. He was asleep when Recovery Girl arrived to see how he was doing. Izuku's injuries, which included internal bleeding, multiple broken ribs, a broken femur, and a hairline fracture in his skull, meant that it was not surprising that he wasn't cleared to leave until Sunday. However, it was fortunate that Aizawa was also released at that time. At the moment, Izuku let Aizawa lean against him as they cautiously ascended the stairs of their apartment building. Feeling sympathy for the man in the gauze, Izuku said to Aizawa, "Almost there." He hurriedly opened the apartment door and asked, "You'll be fine until tomorrow, right?" Aizawa said, stepping further into the apartment, "Sit down, Izuku." Izuku stiffened, and the wounded boy muttered haltingly, "I was actually hoping to go to sleep, kind of tired." "Sit down, please." Aizawa gestured toward his couch. Izuku sighed and cautiously sat down on the couch, staring down at his hands while Aizawa took a seat across from him on an antique recliner. Izuku shrinks in self-defense as Aizawa says, "I told you to fall back. You disregarded me and nearly killed yourself." Izuku looks up at his mentor and teacher and blurts out, "I gave Mineta and Sue time to get you out of there because that hand guy and his little puppet wouldn't have just let us walk out." Izuku bites his lip when Aizawa interrupts, saying, "You should have gone back to the stairs as soon as you had escaped the villains in the flood zone. You shouldn't have been near the center to begin with." Izuku muttered, slowly looking down once more, "I couldn't ignore the fact that you were facing off against a dozen villains on your own end. And I'm sorry, I wanted to make sure you were okay." Aizawa sighs and briefly glances out the window before getting up and sitting next to Izuku. "You also saved my life. And I can't truly be mad at you for that. I'm proud of you, son," he said, with a hint of guilt piercing his heart as Izuku recoiled. What?" Izuku whispered as his head jerked up and he stared at Aizawa in disbelief. "And while I don't want you to see you making a habit of this, I can't help but be proud of the way you took charge. Just, please, next time, worry about your own safety." Aizawa sighs as Izuku unexpectedly hugs him, trailing down the young boy's cheeks as he sobs, "I don't want to see you injured like that again. I'm proud of you. I promise. I'll do what you say next time, I promise." While his classmates were whispering among themselves, Bakugo glared at the blackboard. "Do you think he'll be back?" "I don't know, he looked pretty roughed up." "Aizawa definitely won't be here, did you see his injuries?" As she entered the room, Iida yelled, "Come to your desks, everyone, class is about to begin." Sato said, "Iida, you're the only one who isn't at his desk." Iida sat down at his desk and complained to himself. Kaminari asks, "You guys think Midoriya will be here?" "Of course I will." Izuku entered with a few bandages on his arm and forehead, and everyone turned to face the door. He was smiling as they started to welcome him back. Leveling a knife hand at his friend, Iida cried, "Midoriya, I'm relieved that you have returned none the worse for wear." Izuku sheepishly says, "Thanks Iida, sorry I haven't been in contact with anyone, barely got released yesterday." He looks at Bakugo, who is suddenly standing and stomping towards him. "Bakugo," Izuku began, but stopped when the boy started throwing a book at his head. Izuku shrank beneath Bakugo as he roared, "You asshole, you have any idea how worried the old hag was about you?" "SSS sorry. I didn't think. I'll go see her after school." "Stop hitting me, Bakugo shit. You better go see her, and you better apologize for being an asshole." "Their relationship is strange," Sue said, receiving nods from Sato and Tokiyami. Aizawa gruffly said, "Everyone get to your seats." As soon as he entered the room, Bakugo and Izuku were at their desks. Bakugo still complaining while Izuku rubbed his head. "I'm happy to see you back and in good health, Mr. Aizawa," Iida said to their teacher. "That's full health?" Jiru inquired apathetically. "Shouldn't you be resting up, Mr. Aizawa?" Sue inquires. Ignoring Kirishima's manly remark as he sits down, Aizawa said, "Don't worry about me. Heroes can't let something as simple as injuries keep them from their duties. Now, we've all had a busy weekend, and with what happened at the USJ, I wish I could say that your time here is about to get easier. But the truth of the matter is, you're all about to be tested." Aizawa glared at the class, and everyone held their breath. The UA Sports Festival is in a month. As soon as Aizawa displayed his quirk, the class burst into cheers and stopped. In terms of organized championship-level competitions, the sports festival has essentially taken the place of the Olympics, he said. "For those of you who don't know, every member of the hero department must participate. This is your opportunity to influence the hero profession as a whole, as many pro heroes watch the sports festival and base their decisions on it when selecting their third-year draft picks. So, this is our opportunity to draw attention, Hagakure cried out. As Hagakure and Mina gushed together, Ojiro laughed uncomfortably and said, some of us more than others. Is holding the sports festival so soon after the events at the USJA wise move? Uraraka inquired anxiously. However, don't assume that this will be an easy task, Aizawa stated. The school board decided that this is exactly what the public needs to know, that UA will be continuing on. Anything is possible during the sports festival. Students enrolled in support and general education courses will be there to demonstrate their abilities. And they might just be taking your place in this class if you're not careful. They all thought they were largely safe from being expelled after the first day, but now they were in danger of just losing their seats, and everyone visibly stiffened at that. As President Mike walks in and the door slides open, Aizawa says, now that announcements are over, let's move on to English. Do any of you believe that Mr. Aizawa was sincere? As they all gathered their belongings and prepared to leave for lunch, Mineta asked anxiously. Probably, sighed Kaminari, yes, it has happened before. That it has. Yaoyorozu replied, in fact, Mr. Aizawa himself is one of the few general ed students who got their spot in the hero class through the sports festival. So manly. Kirishima grinned and said, I'm thrilled right now. Imagine if we were scouted by real professionals. Anyone ordered a flash mob? Izuku said, laughing as he opened the door and considered heading to the roof once more. With all the students staring at them, he poked a thumb out the door to ask. As Bakugo started to make his way to the door, everyone in the classroom stiffened, some of them wondering if they were going to get into another fight. Bakugo smirked and said, isn't it obvious? They're all wanting to get a peek at the class that went up against real villains. He said, scouting the competition before the festival. He glanced at everyone present and said, out of my way, extras. You can't just call people you don't know, extras, Iida insisted. He's right, Kachan. Izuku gave Bakugo a shoulder pat. Izuku turned around to see a purple-haired child approaching with heavily bagged eyes. You know, I heard a lot about you 1A students. A new voice said, but now I'm not seeing what the big deal is about, you're just a bunch of self-entitled brats. Izuku sighed. You got something to say? Bakugo snarled and advanced on the boy, but Izuku intervened. With his friend scoffing but stepping back, Izuku said sharply, leave it, Bakugo. And you, Izuku said, turning to face the other boy, I can understand not feeling so crazy about us, but I wouldn't belittle anything that anyone in this class has done. And why is that? Everyone in the vicinity shifted uneasily when Izuku said, because you weren't at the USJ. Do yourself a favor, friend, and let your actions speak for you during the festival. Class 1A started to leave after saying, because putting on a front before the truth just makes you look like an ass. Hey. Izuku looked at yet another new individual and moaned. I'm Tetsu from Class 1B. I thought 1A was supposed to be better. Well, I'm coming for all of you, you hear me? The child yelled. And perspired as he was blatantly disregarded by everyone in 1A. As they walked, Izuku told his class, the only people we need to prove anything to are ourselves in the pros. Don't worry about what they say. Kirishima exclaimed, yeah, Midoriya's right, we're going to blow this away. Before long, the whole class was cheering, and Bakugo smiled as Uraraka gave him a friendly shove. Izuku sighed and sat on the roof's edge, stretching while holding a tray of noodles and katsudon. What a day. He picked up the tray and started eating, enjoying the pork cutlet while humming. Thought there was going to be a fight for a moment, he said. Feeling a familiar presence behind him, he muttered around his food, so much better than the store-bought. As he continued to eat, he called out, you know, you can come sit over here. A short girl behind him slowly emerged with a tray of food in her hands, and he said softly, avoiding eye contact as she approached, there's plenty of room for both of us. All right, she said softly as she sat down beside him and started eating, her legs swinging over the edge. Izuku crossed his legs and started to meditate after finishing his meal and placing it next to him. There was a friendly silence between the two before Izuku spoke once more. I wanted to thank you for rousing me from my meditation last week, and for not thanking you at the time. She continued to eat, saying, that's okay, you had more important things on your mind. Thank you. And thank you as well for speaking up for me about the break-in, he said, adding that it was still impolite of me. Don't mention it. She finished her meal and gazed out over the horizon as Izuku continued her meditation, and silence returned. Without opening his eyes, he stated, my name is Izuku, Izuku Midoriya. Yui Kodai. She comes back with, "Nice to meet you." Izuku sighs and gets up, saying, "It's about time for class." He holds out his hand to her, which she reluctantly accepts, and then helps her up, saying, "It's best not to be late, isn't it? We have a lot of work ahead of us." She nods, and they start walking side by side. Yui is holding her bag to her chest, and Izuku has his hands in his pockets. Neither of them speaks until they get to Class 1B, where Izuku waves goodbye. Tetsu yelled at Izuku, "Hey! You're that fire bastard, aren't you?" Izuku slipped into Class 1A as the bell rang and called back, "You're looking for Endeavor, out of Tokyo." "Alright." Aizawa began, placing the roster on the table. "You're all dismissed for the afternoon. Core classes will be the same in the mornings. After lunch you'll be released to train individually. Any time not devoted to studying will be spent in the gym, understood?" They all said, "Yes sir," and started working on their plans. "Hi, Midoriya. Are you able to assist me in training with my quirk?" Kaminari called, rushing to the fire user. "You must have something to assist me, even though I am aware that I am not as capable as you are." Izuku smiled warmly and said, "Yeah sure, let's head to the sparring rooms." "Hello, Bakubro." As the boy attempted to speak to Uraraka, Kirishima yelled, "Let's spar, I want to improve my hardening skills," and threw an arm around him. Bakugo whispered to Uraraka, Sure, do you want to join or?" "That's fine Bakugo." Uraraka waved him off with a grin. Mina was talking about going to training ground beta to work on her quirk with Sero and Ojiro. "I'll just tag on with them." Bakugo sighed and glared at Kirishima, whose smile gradually faded. All right. Have I interrupted you?" Kirishima inquired. "Stop talking like a fool, come on." After a week. Beta for ground. Izuku sidestepped Kaminari's jabs, saying, "It's easy to tell what you'll do next." He slid into the boy's defense and swung his legs out from under him. "You're projecting too much." "It's challenging." Kaminari sulked and sat up, complaining, "You've trained for 4 years on my 1 week." Izuku flicked his forehead and said, "The only thing you're doing wrong is thinking too much into it. Every time you try to punch, bring your arm back. It should be quick forward movements, nothing should be going back, okay?" Yeah, alright. Great, now get up, let's go again." "Release," Uraraka said, pressing her fingers together. She yelled, causing a number of boulders to fall as Mina skated ahead. As the rocks fell, she threw acid globs onto them, striking 2 of them while Aoyama's bellybutton laser exploded the 3rd. Coming through. With Ojiro right behind him and his tail easily lifting him into the air, Sero whooped and swung through the area on his tape. Sigma ground. As Bakugo detonated another potent explosion, Kirishima grunted in agony and slid back across the grass. "That's the best you got," he yelled as Sato darted in and punched the boy in the body with his sugar-fueled blows. "You believe that you're hot as hell?" Bakugo roared and charged forward once more. Sue was climbing as quickly as she could while up in the mountains, while Juru and Hagakure were running alongside Yaoyorozu. Below her, outside a cave, Tokiyami was relaxing while he watched Iida run around with his quirk. "It's almost time for lunch, isn't it?" He beckoned to Sue. Sue looked back at her friends and called down, "Yeah, but Yaoyorozu told me not to blow the whistle until Hagakure finished 2 laps. A field of physical fitness. While Koda was talking to the animals nearby, Todoroki stood in the center of the field, performing various yoga poses. A few Gen Ed students followed him through them as Shoji made as many limbs as he could. "Koda, are you ready for lunch?" Shoji approached his friend and asked, "When did Todoroki start teaching yoga?" The multi-armed boy gave him a small nod. Todoroki turned around as Koda started to shake his head and make quick gestures. "Who are you all?" As the general education students abruptly took off, Todoroki questioned bewilderedly, what was that about? As he made his way to the lunchroom, he asked himself this question. At lunchtime. "How is your class and your training going?" As they ate, Izuku questioned Yui. "As well as can be," she sang. Tetsu keeps trying to get all of us to go to the gym." "Really? Are you planning to go?" inquired Izuku with curiosity. "Maybe. How's your training going?" She shrugged. "As usual, except that I'm now assisting Kaminari with his peculiarity." He looked at her as she stood and sighed, "Guy thinks too much into it." The 2 of them walked to Class 1B together after she said simply, "Lunch is over." He stood up and assumed his usual position on her right side. "Bastard fire." Tetsu let out a roar. Izuku gave Yui a brief wave and said, "Angry guy," before turning to leave. "Yui, Why do you spend so much time with him? As Tetsu fumes, Kendo asked curiously. Shrugging, she said, he's good company. Midoriya, why do you spend so much time with that one B-girl? As the two entered the weight room wearing the UA gym uniform, Kaminari questioned Izuku. Thinking about the question, he said, she's usually on the roof when I go eat. And she's not a bad conversationalist. Enough talk, let's get to pumping iron. The day of the sports festival comes a week later. Izuku eyed the crowd as he made his way to the UA stadium. Hi, Midoriya, Kirishima called, running up to his friend who stopped for a second to let him catch up. You ready, man? Izuku said casually, always. How about you? I'm excited. I have no doubt that I will succeed today. 2 weeks of training doesn't seem like a lot of time, does it? He cheered as they resumed their walk. Yes, but we were only instructed to get ready, not to refine or anything. I'm confident that we'll all succeed. It's true, but do you know who's giving the opening speech? I assumed it was Bakugo, but he was quite reticent about it. Kirishima halted when he saw that Izuku was not pursuing him. Midoriya? He asked, glancing back and recoiling a little at the boy's expression. He continued to smile, but his eyes appeared haunted. He then slowly started to squat down and curl up against himself, saying, Midoriya? With hesitation, Kirishima asked. How could I have forgotten that stupid speech I had to give? As his classmates gathered around him, silently chatting among themselves, Izuku tried his best to quiet his mind. You literally forgot what you were supposed to do today. If I go up there and fail the oath, Kachan will never let me forget it. I have no idea what the oath is. Shit. Hey Midoriya. Izuku jumped a little and asked, you ready, man? As he glanced up at Kirishima, who was grinning and standing above him. He stood up as Kirishima patted his shoulder and sighed, as ready as I'll ever be. As Kirishima said, just relax, man, you got this. Izuku muttered as he and the others made their way slowly to the entrance. Yeah, you're right. Midoriya. Izuku paused and turned back to face Todoroki, who was erect and staring intently at the other boy. With caution, Izuku questioned, what is it, Todoroki? Objectively speaking, I believe I am stronger than you are. And I want you to know that no matter what, I will be aiming to crush you in the festival. I will not be beat. As Kirishima started to splutter, Izuku actually grinned. Come on, Todoroki. There's no need to declare war on each other. Izuku looked at Todoroki, who didn't flinch from his hard gaze, and said, it's okay, Kirishima. This festival is going to test all of us. He said loudly enough for everyone to hear, as of right now we'll be actively competing against each other for a chance to win. You're going to crush me? Well, then you better be ready to use that fire, Todoroki, because I'll be bringing everything I got for this. You two done posturing? Bakugo sneered. Izuku walked to the exit and said, I am. Let's hit it. Izuku stood with his class, hands in his pockets, as President Mike started to open the games in front of a boisterous stadium full of applauding spectators. Hello and welcome to the UA Sports Festival. Good morning. We'll be watching today as the first-year classes compete against one another to present their work. We can now see the Hero Department's Class 1A and 1B down at the entrance tunnel. As they walked, Izuku whistled and looked around, asking, are you going to be able to get it up, number 2? Bakugo instantly started to glower when Izuku whispered to him. He complained, just you wait, shitty Deku. Izuku laughed. Our general course classes C, D, and E are behind them. Support course classes F, G, and H followed up. Isn't it the case that all of these kids appear eager to go a race? They all have their game faces on, that's for sure. You're right. Let's head to the field now, where the top student from the first year will administer the sportsman's oath. After taking a deep breath, Izuku moved forward and stepped onto the main platform next to Midnight. He glanced at every student before slowly focusing on Yui, who gave him a small smile and a thumbs up. Izuku then smiled and started talking. I pledge today, to show good sportsmanship and honor. I pledge to treat my opponents with the respect they deserve and challenge them to go beyond plus ultra, and show themselves to be worthy of calling themselves students of UA. Izuku nods to Midnight as he finishes, and the other students start to clap courteously. He then returns to his class. Bakugo mockingly said, I would have done the same thing if I had just promised to win. As Midnight announced the first event, Izuku smirked and said, that's why you're not number 1. Are you prepared to see second place again? Are you prepared for me to kick your butt? The smiled Izuku said, bring it, Kachan. That's your nephew, isn't he? Looking at the other prisoner beside him while he watched the sports festival on TV, Iroh grinned and said calmly, that it is, He certainly has grown into himself since we last met. Hi, Demo. Put 5 soups on Midoriya. The man called across the room, drawing the attention of another prisoner. I had a positive vibe about him. With a laugh, Iroh said, I'm glad you believe in my nephew. Have you been trained by the Western Dragon? Children must be strong. Hey Soren. Let's go. Board is waiting for you, Iroh said, glancing to the cell entrance where 2 officers were standing by. As he left, Iroh stood up and said to his fellow prisoners, do tell me what I miss. Iroh, good luck. Leave. As the ice Todoroki attempted to use to freeze everyone abruptly exploded in steam, Izuku shot into the air, leaving a trail of fire in his wake. Did you think that would work? As the two head straight for the 0-pointers, Izuku taunts Todoroki. Todoroki freezes one as Izuku weaves through, trying to maintain his momentum as he avoids Mineta's attack and slams him into a 3-pointer. And they go. A wide margin between Midoriya and Todoroki. As soon as he arrived at the canyon, Izuku leapt, sending fire exploding from his feet and sending him hurtling through the air again. This time, no, Izuku leaps off of it at the last second, turning in midair and releasing a torrent of fire from his mouth, forcing Todoroki to jump back to avoid being burned while Izuku continued, grinning broadly, as Todoroki snapped and sent a huge spike of ice at him. Midoriya takes the lead with a dragon-worthy move. Todoroki snarled and ran across the canyon as the others followed, saying, no. These two are insane. Uraraka yelled. You're hardly conscious of this? As Iida started to slide down the ropes, Sue questioned, this is my moment? As Sue walked away, Uraraka sighed, come on, now you can't stop. She energized herself and drifted across the canyon while Bakugo blasted by overhead. As Todoroki ran up, Izuku sprinted between the mines as quickly as he could, his eyes darting back. Thought I lost you, Izuku said, assuming a defensive stance as Todoroki threw a wave of ice at him. As Izuku's fire struck his ice, Todoroki yelled, I told you that I would beat you. Steam and vapor hissed into being as Todoroki struck, his punches and jabs forcing Izuku to dodge as he nimbly continued on, never taking his eyes off Todoroki. Deku. Izuku moaned and leapt back even more as Bakugo charged in, obliterating the area where he had just been. Oh shit. You believe you can pretend I'm not here to kick your ass too and play footsie with Icy Hot? Dodging the explosive boy's punches and fending off Todoroki's own attacks, Izuku taunted, didn't know you were jealous Kachan. With a taunting glint in his eyes, Izuku suddenly grabbed Bakugo's arm and grunted with exertion as he swung the other boy into Todoroki, sending them both into a cluster of mines. See you, Izuku yelled, started running again, and crossed the finish line before either could get their bearings. Fuck it. You're to blame, Icy Hot. As Todoroki got back on his feet and gave a puff of annoyance before sprinting after them, Bakugo growled and sprang forward. As Bakugo ran past the line, Izuku sighed and stretched, smiling cheekily. Number 2 again. You must like that position, he said. Just you wait, shitty Deku. I'm going to kill you the next round. Bakugo gritted his teeth and pointed a finger at him as more people started to arrive. Uraraka exclaimed, panting, guys, and rushed to them. You guys. Good job, she said, congratulating them and giving them both a thumbs up. You guys were awesome. Bakugo frowned as Izuku laughed and said, thanks Uraraka. Uraraka cheered and said, oh come on Bakugo. You got second place, shouldn't you be happy? No. Not when Deku gets first. Having become accustomed to the rivalry between the two, Uraraka rolled her eyes with affection. What do you guys think will happen in the next event? Izuku shrugged and said, not sure, probably team-oriented. Midnight then started gathering everyone for an announcement. It's now time for our second event, she said as the huge screen behind her came alive. Cavalry battle. It'll work like a regular playground cavalry battle. The rider will have a bandana that has the group's points. The points will be decided in increments of 5. If you came in at 40th place, then you will have 5 points, and each place will increase by 5 all the way to second place. The whistle of Izuku said, lot of points, and first place will have 10 million. Everyone around Izuku suddenly became very interested in the boy, and he froze, his face looking decidedly blank. With his eyes closed, he muttered, oh fuck. You have half an hour to form your teams, I wish you luck. Izuku scanned the area rapidly, already feeling uneasy because no one would even look at him. Hey Ojiro. He began, walking toward his fellow martial artist, who gave him an awkward laugh and waved him away. With a, sorry Midoriya. He left. Izuku sighed and looked around once more before letting his head hang. Yeah, I get it, he said. Midoriya. Running up to him, Uraraka cheered, let's work together. Thank heavens, absolutely. You are a queen, an empress. Izuku cried, bowing to her. My gratitude truly knows no limits. Uraraka laughed uncomfortably and said, wow, I didn't think you wanted to team up with me so bad. Izuku acknowledged, I was afraid that everyone would just ignore me. How embarrassing would that have been? I'm the only one without a team 30 minutes up. Is it not possible for you to solo almost everyone here? I don't want to, though. Izuku looked around and sighed, saying, with you on the team, we'll be almost guaranteed. But who else is there? Izuku approached Iida and said, hey Iida. Come work with me. We could win easily with Uraraka's zero gravity and your mobility. Iida bowed respectfully to his friend and said, I'm sorry, Midoriya, but I've already joined another team. Before turning back to Uraraka, Izuku's shoulders dropped a little. Well shit. Good luck then Iida. He said, grinning confidently at his friend. Well, now what? Do you know of anyone who would be willing to join? He asked her. Uraraka started, I would say Sue but she was already talking to Choji, and then yelled in surprise as someone she knew practically attacked Izuku. You, 10 million. Join my teams, she shouted, causing Izuku to flinch back a little. Where in the world did you come from? As Hatsume started to examine him, Izuku cautiously raised his arms and asked. Mei Hatsume's name, support course class 1H, she said. All right, tell me why you wish to collaborate with me, he asked, unwinding a little. Because you'll be in the center of everything, and it's the ideal opportunity for me to flaunt my adorable children. Your kids? Izuku perspired next to Uraraka. Yes? Hatsume jerked out a case and opened it to reveal a number of devices. Take whatever you want. Izuku chuckled, a little taken aback. Oh, I think you can be on this team. He looked at Uraraka, who was nodding enthusiastically, and said, we just need one more, before turning to face a relaxing Tokiyami and shouting, join us. The second event is halfway over, and things are getting hotter. Present Mike cheered, making Aizawa groan as he watched Izuku's team dart around the field. Izuku's fire warding off other teams while Tokiyami's dark shadow deflected any attempts at attacking. Midoriya's holding stubborn to that 10 million. Moreover, the remainder of 1A isn't doing well. Even Bakugo was removed. As he glanced at the leaderboard, Izuku exclaimed, that doesn't bode well for anyone. What are you saying? As they lifted off into the sky again, Uraraka inquired. After a series of explosions, he trailed off, saying, Bakugo's full of pride, you do anything to hurt that pride. He was followed by a terrified scream, yeah, that. It's fortunate that he isn't listening to us, Uraraka remarked. Yeah, let's go with that. Izuku exclaimed as they hit the ground again. Almost immediately after, they were surrounded by ice walls and attacked again. Cover yourselves. Izuku commanded, giving Tokiyami time to think of Dark Shadow before he lost his fire. Izuku yelled, get ready to move again, guys. But was startled to see Todoroki's team dart by and rip his bandana off his forehead. No. No way, Izuku muttered. And just like that, Todoroki has thrown Midoriya out of the running. Eyes narrowing, Izuku turned back to face Todoroki and said, Tokiyami. Can you manifest Dark Shadow as soon as I cut my flames off? Izuku asked. I believe I can. Tokiyami nodded. Good, because we're getting those points back. Hatsume, Uraraka, hang on. When Izuku's team suddenly flew in their direction, Todoroki's eyes widened and he exclaimed, Iida, we need to move. Iida exclaimed, my engines are still stalled. As Team Midoriya appeared unexpectedly next to them, the fire extinguished and the dark shadow darting ahead. As Todoroki tried to defend himself from Tokiyami, Izuku watched as fire started to creep up his left side. Without thinking, Izuku's own hand moved, diverting Todoroki's fire and enabling Dark Shadow to remove 2 bandanas from Todoroki's neck. Time seemed to slow down. Izuku yelled, fall back, and jumped a little when Hatsume and Uraraka turned on their hover boots, dragging the 2 boys back as the last buzzer sounded. And first place in the last seconds, Team Midoriya. Izuku looked at the 10 million headband and smiled as his teammates applauded, disappointing him. Good job Tokiyami, Dark Shadow. Izuku nodded to the bird-headed boy and his peculiarity. We wouldn't have gotten the headband back if you hadn't diverted Todoroki's fire, Midoriya, Tokiyami said in response. It was your quick thinking that even gave us the chance. As Midnight started to set up the bracket for the one-on-one battles, Izuku said with ease, team effort then. He narrowed his eyes at the purple-haired child after Ojiro stepped down and asked, "What do you think that was about?" Uraraka whispered to him. He muttered, "I don't know," and dismissed them, saying, "Let's just get something to eat and not worry about it for the time being." Izuku stopped as he turned to face the half-and-half boy, who was as stoic as ever, but something else glinted in his eyes. Was that uneasiness? "Midoriya." Todoroki called. "May I speak with you?" "What's this about Todoroki?" Izuku asked as they walked. "I'm kinda hungry." After giving it some thought, he nodded and followed Todoroki into the tunnels, hands in his pockets. He whispered, "I wanted to apologize for the declaration of war." Izuku pondered, "Not the coolest thing you've ever done, but I understand." As he was about to leave the stadium, Todoroki said sharply, "Not that. I used my fire. I had promised myself a long time ago that I would never use that quirk in battle. And the second I was overwhelmed, I used it. You know. I get it." Izuku leaned slowly against the wall and looked at Todoroki with understanding eyes. "I was in a spot like you once," he said. Todoroki started, "You have no idea what I've been through. I know what it's like being scared of a father's quirk." Izuku said pointedly, making Todoroki stop, "Not all of these scars on my body came from foster care." He continued, looking down at his hands, "My old man was abusive when he got the mind for it. And in my hate, my fear, and my doubt, I ended up killing him when my quirk finally manifested." He gave a humorless chuckle. "After that I didn't use my quirk for anything. I was so scared I was going to hurt someone. But someone close to me told me that I couldn't let fear control me. That I must master it as I must master myself." He looked at Todoroki. "I don't know why you don't want to use your fire. I don't know what Endeavor has done, or hasn't done, but I know what it means to be afraid of your quirk, and I know how all-consuming that fear is. But you can't let it control you, Todoroki. You can't go through life handicapping yourself to prove a point." He sighed and pushed off the wall, walking away from the still shell-shocked Todoroki. Izuku walked past him and remarked, "I of all people should know that a fire quirk is dangerous in the hands of a troubled mind." Long after Izuku had left, Todoroki remained motionless, whispering to himself, "He doesn't understand." Ojiro approached Izuku as he was heading to the fairgrounds to grab a bite to eat before the competition started. "Hey Midoriya. Can we talk real quick?" "We're going to eat first," Izuku sighed, "because I'm starving." With Aizawa moaning a short distance away, Present Mike yelled into his microphone, "And we're back with our first matchup of the final event. This first fight is against the fiery flame user who's taken this festival by storm. Give it up for Izuku Midoriya." Looking across the room at his opponent, Izuku crossed his arms over his chest and remarked, "I think this is the first time a crowd's been happy for me to be somewhere. A child who appears to need a nap more than erasure here is his challenger. Watch it, Shinso Hitoshi's own general studies. So, you get to finally show us what you're capable of, huh? What's that special fire quirk you have?" Shinso asked, squinting at Izuku. "You've actually been kind of impressive." "Are the two competitors prepared?" Midnight called. Izuku lowered his head and assumed his ready position. "Didn't that monkey tell you about my peculiarity? He's a fool, wasting his one chance for something as absurd as honor," Hitoshi questioned sarcastically. "Start. Be mindful of what you say," Izuku growled and rushed forward with his fist cocked back. Izuku abruptly stopped moving, his eyes going glassy as he just stood in the center of the arena, leaving everyone stunned. Shinso smirked and said, "Hey, it's over. Now turn around and walk out of bounds." Izuku turned slowly and started to leave. Bakugo growled from the stands, "What the fuck, Deku? What the fuck are you doing listening to his commands?" Ojiro moaned, "Damn it, I told him not to talk to him." Kaminari questioned bewilderedly, "But what happened? Why is he just walking out?" Izuku felt as though his head was underwater down on the field. "This is his peculiarity, huh? It's both harmless and risky. I must break it somehow, but how? How? Let the fire of Agni guide you, Izuku." As Izuku spun around, breathing heavily and clutching his arm, which was now raw and red from burning himself, fire burst out of his hand, scorching the ground and sending a wave of hot air through the stadium, forcing Shinso to cover his eyes. "What's this?" Midoriya just burned himself to get out of Shinso's control. In an attempt to get Izuku to speak again, Shinso started, resourceful. "Really, you lucked out with that quirk." Izuku sprang forward faster than Shinso could keep up, slamming his fist into the other boy's stomach before a roundhouse sent Shinso reeling out of bounds. "And the winner is Midoriya by ring out. I was kinda worried for a minute." Izuku did not recoil or turn away as he saw Shinso standing there glaring at him. Instead, he returned the glare with a smirk that made Shinso smile. Shinso remarked, "Not bad, Midoriya, but I got you next time." As Shinso used his quirk, Izuku chuckled to himself and said, looking forward to it. Deku. Ah. As they watched Bakugo leap on Izuku and put the easygoing fire user in a headlock before repeatedly punching him in the head, the whole Class 1A was sweating. "The fuck do you think you're doing out there? You almost blew it, you bastard. If I have to go through this festival and not kick your ass, then I am going to kick your ass. Isn't that unnecessary?" Izuku sobbed and retreated from Bakugo as Kirishima intervened. "What took place there? It appeared that Shinso briefly occupied you," Su inquired. Izuku rubbed his head where Bakugo had punched it and remarked, "It has something to do with his quirk. Brainwashing, dude almost had me too. But I explained how it operates to you. How did you still end up under it?" Ojiro cried. Sitting down and gazing at the arena, Izuku sighed, "I'm not really good at keeping my mouth shut sometimes. It's Todoroki versus Sero now, right?" As they all looked down, Sato confirmed, "Yep, they haven't started yet. Man, Todoroki does not look happy." "Does he ever?" Bakugo complained. "Sero is going to get fucked," Izuku stated bluntly as he leaned forward. Bakugo complained and said, "Agreed." Kaminari chuckled and said, "Come on, guys. Sero is very talented." Sero launched a quick opening attack to start the game, nearly sending Todoroki out of bounds with his tape. That was stopped by a giant glacier. Izuku shivered a little at the bad memories and stared in mild shock at the ice that had nearly covered their class. He muttered, "Talk about anger management," before turning to face his classmates, who were in varying states of shock. Kirishima whispered, "Did he have to shut Sero out like that? Talk about harsh." As Todoroki was crowned the winner and the ice was broken to the applause of, "Nice try," Uraraka muttered, "I don't think this is about Sero." Izuku lit a fire to warm himself and everyone around him. As Iida and Hatsume entered the arena, Izuku glared at them and said, "If that's an indication of how the rest of this festival is gonna go, then we'll all need to put our game faces on." After 15 minutes, Bakugo and Izuku were laughing and clinging to one another while they watched Hatsume essentially manipulate Iida like a toy car. "I can't believe she fooled him with that sportsmanship bullshit," Bakugo gasped. Izuku laughed and slid off the bench slowly as Mina and Sero joined in, saying, "Oh poor Iida. Undone by a pair of goo-goo eyes." Uraraka chuckled and said, "I think it was sweet." He got some glares from people around him when Mineta laughed and said, "Until she made him look like an idiot." Izuku laughed as Hatsume emerged, saying, "He's going to have to do even better in the next few rounds to make sure he gets recognized." Either way he won. And now for the next fight. Kaminari Denki, the high-wired dude with a megawatt smile, and Shiozaki Ibara, the silent assassin of Class 1B, in the other corner. As Shiozaki spoke up, Izuku's smile vanished. "Oh great," he scoffed, leaning back, Bible thumper. "Are you acquainted with her?" Uraraka inquired. "No, but I know her type." He grumbled, "Holier-than-thou religious zealots who'll try and push their doctrine on anyone they can." Momo glared at Izuku and said, "I highly doubt she is anything like that." With a slight hand flex, he muttered, "Haven't met one who isn't." He then got up and said, "I'm going to go walk around, see you guys." When they watched Kaminari's fight start, Mina pouted, "Man, way to bring down the vibe." The high-voltage user did a pretty good job of dodging vines and launching weaker attacks at the girl with the vine hair. At least it looks like Kaminari's training paid off. Mina cheered as the boy attempted to approach, but a wall of vines sprang out and slammed into him, sending him flying out of the ring. He didn't go dunce. After 3 fights, Bakugo headed for the arena entrance, feeling mostly confident. He glared at the ground and muttered, "Don't think too far into it. You just gotta blow cheeks out of the arena and move on." "Yo Bakugo, you good?" Izuku was waiting at the exit when Bakugo looked up, startled. "You look like you got something on your mind," Izuku remarked as his friend approached. "Just can't wait to finish this round," he complained. "These fights need to pick up speed if we're gonna duke it out." "But don't underestimate Uraraka, she's got some fight in her," Izuku said, putting a hand on Bakugo's shoulder and chuckling, "I'm so glad I rank so high on your priority list." "TCH, right." Izuku pulled his hand back and remarked, "I'm serious, man. I wouldn't be shocked if she already had a plan to beat you." Bakugo pushed past Izuku, who merely smiled after him, and said, "Will you stop singing her praises already?" I'm going to blow her out of the ring just like all these other extras, then I'm coming for you. His mumble was, may as well go relax until my turn, right? He turned around and nearly instantly bumped into someone else. Sorry, Izuku stopped when he realized who he had run into. Number 2 hero. Endeavor. His smile vanished and his eyes became slightly piercing, and he said, it's an honor, sir. Endeavor rumbled, turning to face Izuku. HMPH. So you're that fire user that Shoto has been talking about. He puts his hands in his pockets to prevent himself from clenching his fists and says, that's me. What can I help you with? He asks. As he approaches the younger boy, Endeavor says, you're strong, and your quirk is the perfect one to show my Shoto how to achieve his full potential. If you are able to convince him to use his fire, then I can guarantee a spot at my agency when you... Izuku brushed past the man without turning around, saying, don't think that since we have similar quirks that I feel some kind of camaraderie with you. Number 2. I will advance myself without your help, remember that. Izuku's cold words caused the hero's eyes to widen in surprise. You see, I'm not here to be anyone's stepping stone. If Todoroki uses his fire, then it will be through his own will, not mine, and definitely not yours. As Endeavor watched Izuku leave, he exclaimed, are all children so rebellious? With a whiff of contempt. With a trembling body from the explosion he used to clear the rocks from the sky, Bakugo slowly lowered his arm. That was close, he whispered, turning back to face Uraraka, who was slowly getting back up on her feet. Deku was right about you. Bakugo called with a joyful smile, you really do have some fight in ya. Uraraka replied, I hope you don't think that's all I have left, and began to run at him unsteadily. Uraraka, show me what you have, he growled, bracing himself to block another of her blows, but he rushed forward when she stumbled and fell, hitting the ground before he could get to her. Hi, Sheiks. Are you okay? As she slowly attempted to push herself up, he asked while kneeling beside her. With her arms trembling, she croaked, I'm not done, before collapsing. I'm not done. Bakugo glanced at Midnight and then back at Uraraka. Hey, he said quietly, it's okay. Bakugo realized that Uraraka was unconscious at this point, and as Midnight proclaimed him the victor, he carefully lifted Uraraka and carried her over to the medical bots that were wheeling slowly in their direction. As he placed her on the stretcher and watched her being taken to the recovery girl, Bakugo muttered, good fight. The muttered words, thank you, Bakugo, caused Bakugo to pause briefly before continuing on toward the tunnel, where Izuku was already waiting. As Bakugo walked past her, Izuku mutely remarked, I told you she had fight in her. Bakugo muttered, when you're right, now hurry up and finish off Icy Hot. Yeah, and hey, make sure to check up on Uraraka, Izuku said with a quiet chuckle, I'm sure she'd love to see you again. Bakugo yelled, watch it Deku, and gave the teenager a fierce look as he emerged onto the arena. It is now time for the second round of this tournament, with our favorite fire user Izuku Midoriya going head to head with the stoic half and half Icy Hot Shoto Todoroki. Izuku called over and observed Todoroki, who had his hands down by his side, saying, just met your old man. Guy's as big an asshole as I thought he would be. Todoroki just continued to look at Izuku without saying anything. Izuku went on, I understand why you don't want to interact with him, in fact, I understand why you won't use your fire at all. Begin. But that won't stop me. With a sharp gasp, the arena surrounding Izuku and Todoroki burst into flames, forcing many to shield their eyes from the intensity of the flames. However, just before another enormous glacier shattered through the flames, cutting them off, Izuku was tapped, his eyes wide with shock and what appeared to be fear before anger overcame both feelings. In contrast to his battle with Sero, Todoroki does not order Midnight to stop fighting, instead, he observes as the glacier starts to glow. A few seconds later, the glacier vanishes, leaving behind a soaked Izuku who is panting and exhaling heavily as steam rolls off his body. After letting out a puff of fire from his mouth with a head shake, Izuku charged forward, launching spinning kicks and palm strikes that sent more and more fire at Todoroki as he closed the distance. Izuku's attacks are repelled by Todoroki's ice pillars, which are so hot that they turn to steam when they come into contact with the fire. Todoroki mumbled, a smokescreen, as his eyes widened and Izuku appeared at his side, slamming his fist into the other boy and sending him flying. The only thing keeping Todoroki from falling out of the ring is a last-minute ice wall. Izuku growled, leaping into the air and bringing his leg down in a fiery axle kick, his flames destroying the wall Todoroki had just been at as the half and half user moved. Quit holding back and fight me, Izuku snarled. Take this. The two teenagers glared at one another as Todoroki snapped, sending multiple spikes of ice at Izuku, who just roared, the spikes being easily melted by his breath of fire before they could reach him. Todoroki's breath puffed out from the excessive use of his ice. After this fight, Izuku starts, which makes Todoroki a bit. When you train with your fire side, I want a serious match out of you. You know as well as I do that this win will be meaningless to me unless I beat you at your strongest. Todoroki began. I told you I will never use that mons, but was interrupted by an irate Izuku. Todoroki, it's your power. You're your own hero, your fire, your quirk, don't let the man deceive you, he yelled. As fire erupts from Todoroki's left side, he feels something inside him snap. Izuku smiles ferociously and assumes an attack stance, saying, come on, as Todoroki launches a two-pronged attack of fire and ice at Izuku. Izuku challenges, unleashing his own fire in a devastatingly large attack. Izuku was still standing, his jacket gone and his tank top worse for wear, as the stadium erupted in steam again as the ice was instantly vaporized. Shoto was lying on the ground, unconscious, 1 foot out of bounds, across from him. Unbelievable. Midoriya is the winner. Now standing in the locker room shower, his muscle shirt off, just letting the water wash away the soot and ash that stuck to his body, Izuku sighed contentedly as he stood beneath the shower head, letting the cold water drum against his head and back. Izuku closed the water off with a little moan, his peculiarity rapidly drying out his skin and pants before he stepped outside and put his muscle shirt back on. When the door opened, Kaminari entered and said, "Hey, how are you?" he inquired. "Yeah, just cooling down a bit," Izuku grinned. "Cool, you're about to be called up, facing Iida." "Good," Izuku murmured as he left with Kaminari in tow. Bakugo versus Kirishima. Who prevailed? Who else? Took a bit, but Kirishima was already weak after his little fight with Tetsu, Kaminari sneered. "And let me guess, he thought it was super manly." He laughed and said, "Yeah, you can't break the guy's spirit, so I'll give him that. Good luck, Midoriya. I sincerely hope you win." Izuku smiled at Iida and walked out into the arena, bumping fists with Kaminari. "Thanks, Kaminari. No support items this time around," he teased. Iida felt ashamed. That was an underhanded tactic on Hatsume's part. I was appalled at being used like that. Izuku shook his arms out and assumed a comfortable fighting stance, saying, "Don't hold back, Iida. I really want to see what you can do." He laughed, adding, appalled or not, it was entertaining. "Begin." Izuku swiftly ducked the attack, his fists setting the ground on fire and causing Iida to leap back. Iida was off like a rocket, with hands reaching forward to push Izuku out of bounds. Izuku yelled, "I said show me what you can do," as Iida started to run around him. He dodged any flames Izuku threw at him with ease before swooping in to throw strong punches that would send the boy tumbling across the concrete. Izuku abruptly pitched forward onto his shoulders and spun after one of these kicks, sending Iida reeling to the brink as his arms and legs erupted in long, sweeping tendrils of fire. Izuku muttered, "Got you." He leapt to his feet, his right fist exploding like a viper to launch a potent fireball that struck Iida's chest and knocked the boy out of the ring. And the winner is Midoriya. As the taller boy stood back up, squirming from the pain in his chest, Izuku rushed to Iida and said, "I tried not to burn you. I have to admit, I thought I had you there before that little spinning move. Was that something your mentor taught you?" Iida smiled kindly and reassured him, "I'm only a bit singed." With a smile, Izuku replied, "No, I saw it in a music video." After giving him a startled look, Iida burst out laughing and said, "Only you, Midoriya. Let's head to the stands." As they made their way to the tunnel, Izuku declared, "I doubt this next fight's gonna last long. I'm actually going to go sit in the waiting room." "You're probably right. Good luck in the finals, Midoriya." "Thanks, Iida." The moment had arrived. Bakugo's explosions produced enough light to weaken Dark Shadow and make the bird-headed boy concede defeat, allowing him to defeat Tokiyami rather quickly. The stadium erupted in applause as Izuku and Bakugo entered the arena, marking the moment of truth. Now the moment you've all been waiting for. The final round of the sports festival. In this corner, the coolest fire user this side of Saitama, Izuku Midoriya. Izuku cautiously extended his arms while maintaining a fixed gaze on Bakugo. And in the other corner, the boy with an explosive attitude and the skills to pay the bills, Bakugo Katsuki. Both contestants nodded when midnight called. "Are both contestants ready? Begin." Bakugo roared, "Deku," as he sent his own explosions at the firebender, forcing him to change course as Izuku brought his arms forward, golden flames erupting from his fists. Izuku skillfully navigated through the attacks, launching his own back at the blonde in the air and forcing him to land. Bakugo roared, "Try this! Howitzer impact!" and hurled the overpowered blast at Izuku. And watched with wide eyes as Izuku appeared to use his hands to spread the explosion before shooting a stream of flames out of his mouth, forcing Bakugo to duck out of the way. Izuku yelled, "Gotta do better than that," before leaping into the air and landing a fiery axle kick that Bakugo deflected with his forearms. Die. With a series of combos that sent flames at Bakugo, Izuku used his explosions to keep himself injury-free despite his muscles contracting painfully. The explosion sent Izuku flying back across the arena, digging his heels into the ground to keep himself inside the boundary. Bakugo gritted his teeth and sneered, "Is this all you got, Deku? Generic shitty fire? Where's that lightning I've heard so much about?" Bakugo retreated a step, but Izuku maintained his stance and narrowed his eyes. "All I've been hearing is how amazing it is when you summon lightning, how powerful," he yelled, "and yet I've never seen you use it. What's the matter? Are all those people just full of shit? Or are you full of shit?" Izuku tightened his jaw and started to perform the technique, saying, "Remember you asked for this, Kachan." As blue arcs of electricity started to leap from Izuku's body, Bakugo roared, leveling both hands at him and saying, "Bring it you shitty nerd. Your lightning against my twin howitzer impact. We'll see who number one is." With hands reaching for the ground, Cementos yelled from the sidelines, "Midnight, we need to stop the fight," as Midnight started tugging on her uniform. Die. ARRRGH. Between the two competitors, a number of concrete barriers appeared, and thunder roared over the sound of an explosion. Dust and smoke clouded the arena, causing Aizawa to jump to his feet as he shouted through the microphone. The concussive impact from both sent a shockwave through the arena, knocking over anyone who hadn't already braced themselves in preparation for what was sure to be a powerful finale. "Midnight, what's going on down there?" Midnight coughed and said, "I don't know. Give it a second, it's clearing up." The audience held their breath as the smoke gradually dissipated, exposing the demolished concrete slabs that had done nothing to prevent the two strong attacks from colliding and creating a crater in the center of the arena. "Unbelievable. They're," Midnight muttered. "They're," Cementos began incredulously. "Both of them are down," Present Mike exclaimed, and it was true. Both Bakugo and Izuku were lying, unmoving, in the arena, both covered in soot and ash. What an unexpected twist. This may be the first draw scene at the festival. "Hold on. Midoriya is on the move," Midnight yelled. As Izuku started to move slowly, the entire arena gasped. His arms pushed weakly against the ground for a few seconds before his chest started to rise. Izuku groaned in pain as he forced himself to kneel, breathing heavily before getting to his feet. "Midoriya has risen," Midnight called, "and Bakugo is unconscious. By knockout, Izuku Midoriya has won." As Izuku looked up, his eyes a little out of focus, the arena erupted in thunderous cheers. He then slowly raised his fist in victory. Reactions to the sports festival were not uniform throughout Japan. The boy who used to run with him on the street had improved even more, and he was eager to see him again. The man with the spiky hair and the burn marks that covered most of his body was impressed. The girl was laughing and giddily dreaming of meeting the fire user and wondering if his blood was spicy. She had a knife clasped in her hand in sharp teeth. Along with his fellow prisoners, Jin cheered for their old friend who had survived the fight in the JDC's mess hall. Paku, who was still cautious of the boy but could not deny his talent and perseverance, observed from the teacher's box. Iroh supported his honorary nephew from the stands, wearing inhibitor cuffs around his wrists and folding his parole documents in his back pocket. Covered in bandages and enjoying their favorite activity, Izuku and Bakugo strolled side by side towards the stadium exit. Teasing one another. "You're very fortunate, Deku," Bakugo said gruffly, "next time I'm gonna blow you out of the ring. I remember you saying that before and, oh, would you look at that, you're still number 2. Izuku groped Bakugo as he held up his medal for first place. "You got lucky, nerd." As they arrived at the exit, Izuku laughed and said, "Come on, man, just admit that I'm." Izuku trailed off when he noticed a familiar figure standing next to Aizawa, chatting cordially with him. "Uncle." Bakugo followed, looking perplexed, as Izuku called and started to jog. "Izuku!" Iroh exclaimed, laughing as the boy wrapped him up in a hug, and returning it happily, "I'm so proud of you." "How did you escape?" Pulling back, Izuku questioned him. Tatsumoto stated that it would be at least a few years. "My parole paperwork appears to have been expedited. I just need to wear these cuffs for the next few months and I'll be free again," he said, grinning. With tears in his eyes, Izuku remarked, That's great. I really missed you, uncle. Iroh placed his hand on the boy's shoulder and said, And I missed you, my boy. He said, You have done everything you said you would and more, and I cannot be more proud of the man you have become. His smile softened into a tiny smile. Izuku stepped aside to introduce Bakugo, who gave the man a quick look and sniffed a little before saying, Uncle, this is my friend Bakugo Katsuki. I knew him from before the incident. Who is the geezer? Iroh laughed when Bakugo asked, and Aizawa gave him a menacing glare. I may be old, but I wouldn't describe myself in such a way. Iroh replied with a smile, I am Iroh Soren. I was Izuku's foster father for a time. He's also the one who trained me. Izuku concluded, I wouldn't be nearly as good as I am now without uncle's guidance. With a frown, Bakugo bowed to Iroh and said, It is an honor to meet you, sir. And meeting you too, young man, is such an honor. Your ability to control your quirk really impressed me. You must have trained a great deal for it. Bakugo boasted, ever since it manifested. Well, how about we all go celebrate your festival placement? Iroh inquired. I think there's a decent yakiniku restaurant nearby, Aizawa, if that is okay with you. I still have some things to take care of before I can go home. Aizawa droned, nudging Izuku. Congratulations, son. You really stepped up today. And Bakugo, I'm sure it won't, but don't let this discourage you from getting better. Next time, I'll crush him. Bakugo sighed, causing Izuku to roll his eyes amicably. I'm sure, Aizawa remarked sardonically as she left. Iroh exclaimed with joy, Well then, let's get going. It's all my treat. As Iroh concluded his story about the first time he and former pro hero King Bumi had celebrated a successful villain takedown, Izuku and Bakugo both laughed. Iroh sighed as he drank his tea quietly. They had finished their meal more than an hour earlier and had mostly been telling each other stories about their adventures. The way I hear it, All Might Tower is still crooked by a few degrees. Can't believe you knew King Bumi. Bakugo responded with amazement. The way Deku talked about you, I thought you were just some small-time tea shop owner. Oh, I am. Iroh laughed, but in my youth I played being a vigilante when the fancy struck me, and Bumi was usually at my side. Izuku leaned forward with Bakugo and asked, What's he up to these days? Iroh appeared thoughtful. Last I heard he was somewhere in China, Iroh continued. He was on the trail of a Yakuza group he said was up to no good. If I know him, he's already taken care of them. He stood up, sighing, and said, I gotta get home, old hag's gonna ride my ass hard if I stay out any later. Bakugo leaned back and checked his phone, then bowed to him. It was an honor meeting you, sir. Similarly, young man, don't be a stranger. I'll serve you my finest jasmine tea whenever you're in the store. After nodding, Bakugo and Izuku slapped hands and said, Later, Deku. See ya number 2. Wait a minute, nerd. Bakugo continued to walk while Izuku laughed. Iroh remarked gleefully, You two have a strong friendship and an even stronger rivalry. Yeah, he's adamant he's gonna take the number 1 spot, but I trust him with my life. True friends are hard to find, so that's good, and ought to be treasured. Iroh looked at his watch and said, Let's go home. Will you be reopening the tea shop? Iroh asked as they made their way to Izuku's apartment after Iroh paid for the food. Obviously, how else can people experience the benefits of tea? Will assistants be required to set it up once more? I'm able to go after school. But that can wait until the week, tomorrow, when we get back to training. Iroh interrupted him, saying, No, you need to focus on your schooling. Besides, I have more than enough friends who will help me get everything I need to get the old place back up. See you in the morning then, Izuku said with a smile, giving Iroh a final embrace before entering his apartment. As Iroh and Aizawa watched from the sidelines, Izuku went through a new form the following morning, his body drenched in perspiration. You must flow through the transitions, Izuku. Iroh said, You're too jerky and stiff. I've told you before that running doesn't count as stretching, Aizawa said, glaring at Izuku. It's because he didn't stretch after his run. That's how muscles get strained. According to Izuku, yes dad. Don't you think we could do a little more cardio at the end of this workout, Iroh? Aizawa questioned the ex-villain. Iroh smiled amiably and nodded, saying, It will definitely help his stamina in a fight. Izuku sighed and started the kata again, complaining, I've brought this on myself. What plans do the other pupils have for this weekend? Iroh asked, turning away from Izuku. Probably, though I am aware that one of my students is currently coping with a family tragedy. They are resting and recuperating so they can attend class on Monday. After finishing the set, Izuku approached and picked up a water bottle, asking, "Family tragedy? What happened?" Aizawa looked at Izuku and sighed, saying, "The hero killer permanently disabled the pro-hero Ingenium. Ingenium is Iida's older brother." "Oh man, poor Iida," Izuku said gently. "I hope he's doing alright. Is that why he wasn't at the awards ceremony?" "He left early to go see his brother." Aizawa nodded her head. "His parents say he's taking this hard. So be sure to look out for him when you return to class on Monday." "Of course." "Good. Now back to work, we still have daylight to burn." Izuku trained with Iroh and Aizawa for the rest of the weekend, going over new forms and longer workouts until it was time to head back to Ua. "I hope Iida's okay," Izuku muttered as he strolled down the street, his leather jacket keeping his uniform dry, while he thought of his friend who looked like a robot. "Midoriya. We're late. Let's go," exclaimed Izuku as he turned around and saw Iida sprinting down the street wearing a yellow rain jacket that reached his ankles. Izuku started running as soon as Iida caught up. "What are you talking about? We still got 30 minutes. Good students arrive 15 minutes before class, now let's go." Iida took off his rain jacket as Izuku shook the rain from his hair, and Izuku laughed and followed him until they were running into the front hall, taking off their shoes along the way. Iida exclaimed, "Now, let's get to class." "Hold on Iida," Izuku called, walking up to his friend. "You alright?" Quietly, he inquired. "Obviously," with a smile that was just a bit too big to be real, Iida said, addressing his friend. "Look man, I heard about your brother," Izuku said softly. Iida cut the bullshit. Iida grinned and sighed. "Yes, that was some bad news. However, I understand that this is not the time to discuss such matters. I swear, Midoriya, I'll be alright." After hesitating, Izuku nodded and placed a hand on his shoulder. "I hope you know that you can talk to me about anything, man." Iida smiled and said, "Of course Midoriya, now let's get to class." As soon as the fire user entered the classroom, Kirishima yelled, "Yo Midoriya. How you doing man?" Izuku bounded fists with the boy and said, "I'm doing good. I feel refreshed and ready to take on anything." "That's manly." "Hey Midoriya," Mina replied, "what was that move you used on Iida during the sports festival?" Izuku laughed sheepishly and remarked, "Just something I came up with on the spot." "Well it was awesome. You got some breakdancing moves." Sweating, Izuku said, as apartment a description as any. He hoped she wouldn't discover that he had picked up that move from the Step Up films. From behind Izuku, Iida exclaimed, "Everyone, class is about to begin. Return to your seats." Izuku laughed and nodded to his peers before making his way to his seat. After 15 minutes, Aizawa entered the room. As he went, he scratched his cheek. Suyu exclaimed, "Mr. Aizawa, your bandages are gone," to her surprise. The old lady went overboard with her treatment. He grumbled as he approached his computer. "First off, I'd like to congratulate everyone in this room. You all did great in the sports festival, and have all improved on your weaknesses. But now is not the time to get complacent, it's time to talk about your internships." "Internships?" inquired Kaminari. "Yes, this is related to the draft pick I was telling you about. Hundreds of agencies watch the sports festival, and will send requests for internships in on the ones who they want to have in their agency. Don't worry if you didn't get any offers, all of you will be doing these internships." He glanced at the chalkboard. "I'll be writing the number of interns each person has received." The students were astounded to learn that Bakugo and Todoroki had gotten the most offers. Bakugo was ranked over 1,000 places lower than Todoroki, while Tokiyami received over 300, matching Iida. The highest numbers were found in the top 5 thus far. Izuku had only been given 10. Uraraka exclaimed in shock, "How? Midoriya deserves more recognition. He won the sports festival. How did this happen?" Yaoyorozu yelled, "There has to be a mistake." Aizawa sighed and said, "No mistake." Yaoyorozu angrily exclaimed, "But this doesn't make sense. If anyone deserves recognition, it's Midoriya." She looked at Izuku in disbelief as he said sharply, "Drop it Yaoyorozu." "But Midoriya." With the exception of Bakugo, everyone stared at him in disbelief as he said, "They probably didn't send anything because of my record, so drop it, please. Now, for the rest of the day, we will be having a special class, as you all need to pick code names," Aizawa said, casting him a sorrowful glance. The atmosphere immediately improved. "Remember that while the names you choose today won't be official, there's always a chance that they can become permanent, so choose wisely or there'll be hell to pay." When Midnight entered the room, with her hands behind her head and her hips sashaying, several of the men, and some of the women, in the room tensed up. She then walked to stand alongside Aizawa. Midnight here will help you choose an appropriate name. I'm going to take a nap. When Bakugo's name, King Explosion Murder, was rejected as being too violent, Izuku, who was idly sketching small designs on his whiteboard, laughed as everyone started to introduce themselves. Izuku questioned, "Did you really think that would work?" He muttered, "Shut it, Deku." Izuku thought of his own name and gave him a shit-eating smile. He wrote down his idea with a small smile, then raised his hand and said, "I'd like to present. I don't want to use Akuma, that's a name that doesn't belong to a hero. And calling myself Agni feels sacrilegious. Come on up then Midoriya. The firebending hero, Kojin, was written on Izuku's whiteboard as he approached. Fire god. I enjoy it. Bakugo complained angrily as he sat down, and Izuku shot him another shit-eating smile. She glanced at the stoic boy, who slowly gets up and moves to the front while holding up his whiteboard, saying, "Well, that leaves Bakugo, who still has to tweak his, and Iida. Are you also going to use your first name?" Iida simply nodded when she asked in surprise, causing Izuku to exchange worried glances with Uraraka. Bakugo wrote angrily, "Lord Explosion Murder," on his whiteboard before charging forward. "Yeah no. VWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVW intern from him. He sighs and says, Edgeshot, Best Jeanist, Gang Orca, Endeavor, Hawks, Death Arms, Mount Lady, X-Less, Rocklock, and Fat Gum. Only 10. He folds the paper and stores it in his pocket as Yui emerge, observing him with interest. As she sat down next to him and ate her meal in silence, she remarked, You look troubled. As he slowly withdrew the paper, he muttered, Just thinking about this intern thing, who did you choose? Since Native was the only one to send me an offer, I'll be working with him. How many offers did you receive? Only 10. At that, she arched an eyebrow, saying, But you won. Yeah. I'm surprised I only got 10, he murmured, but it seems people are still wary of my past. Yui looked up at him. Knowing very little about Izuku's past, but judging from his manner, she assumed he wouldn't tell her just yet. She slowly reached out and took his hand, saying, You're warm. Izuku gives her a gentle squeeze and smiles back, saying, Yeah, it helps in the winter. I think you should go with your head, Yui says softly, and choose someone who has a past like yours, someone who understands. Yui gives him a slight smile before peering across the grounds and leaning into his side. You may be right, thank you Kodai. He looks at her when she says, Call me Yui. Izuku smiles and says, Then call me Izuku. Yui hummed contentedly as they both gazed at the horizon, enjoying the final moments of lunch in quiet comfort. Wearing casual attire and carrying their hero costume cases, Izuku strolled alongside his classmates. Everyone remember, this isn't a break. Aizawa spoke to them all, you will essentially be heroes this week. So carry yourself appropriately, and don't give your heroes any reason to report you for bad conduct. Before everyone started to scatter to catch their trains, there was a chorus of agreements. Before Izuku could follow Iida onto the train, Aizawa placed a hand on his shoulder and asked him to keep an eye on Iida for me please. Aizawa commented, I'm worried he chose Hosu because of the hero killer. I'll do my best, Dad. I'll see you in a week, Izuku said, nodding. As he made his way to the train, Aizawa remarked, Take care of yourself. No unnecessary risks. When the doors of the train closed, Izuku laughed and waved goodbye. He then stretched to go to Iida's seat and settled down on the empty seat next to him. Izuku asked, How's it going, Iida? Iida firmly said, Good, without turning to face his friend. With an eyebrow raise, Izuku said, You sure? You don't sound fine. Iida looked away from Izuku and said, I promise you I'm fine. Izuku sighed when he realized Iida was finished speaking and took out his phone to text Yui instead. Due to one or more of Monoma's tirades against 1A, the two had become closer during the final week before their internships. They frequently touched and held hands, even in the hallways. Perhaps verifying Monoma's charges, Izuku punched him unconscious the first time he started to rant against him, suggesting that he was a criminal Neanderthal. Most likely. Seeing Class 1B laugh at their friends, suffering and feeling satisfied, indeed. They soon arrived in Hosu, where Iida was the first to leave. Izuku watched his friend depart with a sorrowful expression on his face. Izuku sighed, definitely not all right. He then walked downtown with his suitcase slung over his shoulder, taking in the sights before arriving at Xless agency. Before entering the agency, he glanced at the little card with the address of the organization on it and then up at the simple white building in front of him. Inconspicuous, he said quietly. With simple cushioned chairs lining the walls and a single, inexpensive desk between two doors, it was as plain on the inside as it was on the outside. A young, black woman in a business suit was seated at the desk, typing diligently at the outdated computer. "How can I help you?" she asked cautiously, looking up as he walked in, her hand reflexively flexing and exposing sharp claws before swiftly retracting them. He put his case down next to him slowly and said, "My name is Izuku Midoriya." "Oh," her eyes glowed with recognition. "The intern is you. I'm Mia Watanabe, also known as the Sidekick Scratch," she said, getting to her feet and extending her hand. "Put on your superhero attire now. X-Less will return in 5 minutes to collect you." Izuku glanced at the doors and nodded, asking, "Well, which one is it?" Mia gestured toward his right door. He entered the room, surprised to see a locker room, and said, "Thank you." He returned to the outside in his hero's uniform a short while later and asked, "How many heroes work here?" Mia sighed when he asked. "It's only me and X, but we have several applications for sidekicks," she replied. A fresh voice said, "Several from last year's third years." Izuku turned to face the entrance, where X-Less was already dressed in his uniform and waiting with his arms crossed. With a grin on his face, "Good evening, Midoriya. I'm X-Less as you probably know, and I will be your boss for the next week." Izuku said with ease, "I look forward to working with you. First order of business is patrol, so come on, we're killing daylight. Just give up the bag and no one gets hurt." A hulking man with alligator-like skin and appearance held out his hand and said, "Stay any longer and I'll let my boys have some fun with you as well." A middle school girl with red hair and green skin cowered against the wall, surrounded by a number of thugs who were all acting out their eccentricities. "Not on my watch." Izuku leapt into the alleyway, slashed out with his fist, and engulfed one of the guys in a ball of flames, causing the thugs to leap away and look up in disbelief. Before realizing the fire wasn't burning him, the man screamed for a few seconds. Izuku was unconscious as he flew back into the wall when his knee collided with his chin. The boss snarled, "And who's this? Some jumped up new hero?" Smirking, Izuku folded his arms across his chest and said, "You're partially right." He then sank into a defensive position and declared, "I'm the firebending hero, Kojin." The girl was immediately hiding behind him. "Boys, show this upstart what we do to new heroes who interrupt business."
I will continue the story in next part. Till then, bye bye.